Okay, call the special meeting of the Green Mountain Water and Sanitation District Board of Directors to order for the date of September 24th, 2024. Roll call. Dave Wickman is present.
Roger Wendell present.
Randy Little's present.
Art Martinez present.
Okay, going down the agenda, if there's any questions, there is an agenda available. Anyway, item number 1 is called to order. Second is directors matters. Anybody have anything to declare? Seeing none.
Josh, give a printout of that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Do we have any approval, additions, deletions from the agenda? Any changes to the agenda? Going once, going twice, no changes to the agenda. Okay, moving right along to public comment, which is 5 minutes per person. And I'll read the following script. Per motion of the board on April 11, 2021. Members of the public wishing to address the board during the public comment period are asked to keep their comments civil and related to the items on the agenda or to the conduct of the district business. Members of the public wishing to address the board will be recognized by the board to maintain proper decorum. Since the Green Mountain Water District Board values your input, we always offer additional opportunities for the public to provide comments by using the district email system or phoning into customer service in the event they can't get in during the meeting. Okay, without further ado, opening up for public comment. So raise your hand if you want to comment.
Do we just want to introduce ourselves?
We'll get there after the public comment.
Hey, it's the public. I recognize the public.
Not my fault, that's all I want to say.
We're doing public comment. So as the public, do you want to comment?
I'm here to learn.
Well, Dave, you're public. Do you want to comment?
No, thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody online? Luke Miller. There you go. The floor recognizes Luke Miller.
No.
Go ahead and unmute her.
I'm coming. Good evening, board members, Green Mountain Water staff, and all those in attendance tonight for the special Green Mountain Water meeting. I want to thank those representing Tri Hydro Corporation for taking time tonight to address the board and those attending this special meeting with the hope questions asked can be answered and all the parties involved can proceed to the next steps that are recommended by your firm. I also noticed on the agenda, the board will conduct a question and answer period with both Colorado Department of Health and General Services Administration. I hope I deciphered the abbreviations correctly. I must admit, I haven't had the time as of yet to read the report, but will definitely place it on the top of my agenda once I listen to this meeting. Thank you again, everyone, for being here, and I'm interested in hearing the well thought out questions and answers. Have a great discussion and hopefully a productive night. Good night.
Thank you. Anybody else online? I see Dave, Tim, Austin. Anybody online want to comment? Okay, going once, going twice, and gone. Same thing in the room, going, gone. Okay. Well, public comment is concluded. We'll try to keep this relatively open tonight. So I know we could say, we don't want any disruptions and no comment, but if you've got a question, I think you can raise your hand and I think I'll be relatively open to input throughout the course of the meeting. But anyway, so without further ado, the first item is a presentation from Tri Hydro. You guys want to introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, we would. Thanks so much for the opportunity to come and speak with you all about the work that we've been performing on the district's behalf. I'm Fritz Krebs. I'm an engineer with Tri Hydro Corporation. I've been with the firm for over 13 years now. Have been living in Colorado for a bit longer than that myself. I'm a registered engineer in the state of Colorado and have been working in the industry for over 20 years now. It's been. And we'll talk a little bit more about trihydro during some prepared materials that we have for you, a slide deck, but I'll let Dave describe himself a little bit as well.
Thanks, Rich. My name is Dave Haynes. I'm a professional engineer. I'm a senior environmental engineer with TriHydro. I've been with TriHydro for about a year now, but I have over 20+ years of experience in environmental consulting, site investigation, remediation, and some other environmental compliance related experience. I grew up here locally. I grew up in Lakewood. Went to Bear Creek High School, elementary school and high school. I went to Colorado School of Mines with my bachelor's of science degree. And appreciate the opportunity tonight to present kind of our report and go through a couple of the items in our presentation and listen to and answer your questions.
The floor is yours, present.
Okay.
So I share screen at this point?
Yes.
But we've already started. Do you want to comment during public?
Not sure I know what's going on exactly.
Let me proceed.
You don't want to select this one.
So, like, window, and then you're.
See the entire screen. or just-
Manage the entire screen, yeah, and then.
The entire screen and then
It
hit share. And then pull up the slide deck and it should be good. And then the presenter mode, if you would please, make it big for me. Are you able to tell Josh if people can see what we're seeing out there in the world?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, we have some slides prepared for the group's benefit to describe the work that we've done. I'll give a few introductory remarks and then hand it over to Dave, who did the work. So if you go to the next slide, please. Here, this is an overview of the things that we will be speaking to over the course of the next, I guess, however long it takes here. We're here at your disposal this evening. Again, we'll talk about ourselves just a little bit so you can get to know us, the scope of what we were asked to do by the district, site history for the parcel that's in question, the various environmental documents that have been prepared over the course of years or decades, really, the things that we looked at and our findings and recommendations, and ultimately questions and answers for the board and others who are in attendance here. This slide shows the project team. So we're working on behalf of the district, working with Josh and Sam. First and foremost, Miller and Associates, the district's engineering infrastructure contractor, provided comments and direction to our work as well. So we're working with Lauren and David Hawk. I was the project director, providing some high level oversight, and Dave, as he said, was the project manager on TriHydro's behalf. And just a little bit, I'm not going to talk to, this is not a sales presentation here. We're a nationwide consulting firm, about 600 people, got our start up in Laramie, Wyoming, and have spread out through the Mountain West. Have about 15 people in our Lakewood office, which is just down the road. And being an environmental consulting firm, we've been in the business nearly 40 years now, and have grown from a company of 3 up to the 600 people I mentioned, office in different places, and served a wide variety of clients, large and small. Offer a suite of different types of services. 5 different service sectors are highlighted here. Environmental is really what we were focused on in this particular effort, and infrastructure as well, how environmental impacts could potentially affect infrastructure that the district will be potentially installing at this project site. So issues related to site characterization, what environmental impacts are present, their concentrations relative to regulatory standards, and what to be done about it. Issues surrounding permitting, solid waste management, materials management plans, et cetera. We were very fortunate to be selected by the district as part of a public bid process. A request for a proposal went out on the publicly available BidNet. We pursued that work. The RFP was released by the district, and we understood that we were selected based on our expertise with these type of desktop reviews and environmental issues, technical resources. We must have said good things in the interview, apparently. And additionally, we didn't have and do not have any ties to the land developer nor their consultant. The folks working on this have not worked over at the federal center in the past. So we're coming in with fresh eyes, so to speak, in that regard. So what were we hired to do? Detailed on this rather wordy slide here. Essentially, it was a document review of plans that have been prepared by a proposed developer. The utility plans prepared by their engineering consultant, Kimley Horn. Vertex performed a recent series of investigations on behalf of the developer. We reviewed those. CDPHE has provided input on this project. Additionally, looked at other historical files from the data record. These are available online through the Freedom of Information Act. As you'll see in our presentation, did go back quite a distance looking at those files. So sift through all those things, conduct an analysis of what's present, what is proposed, and prepared a draft document with our findings related to this. Had a meeting with Josh and his team to discuss that draft report, make sure it fit their needs. We added some additional details at their request, and submitted the document that you all have reviewed and has been released to the public. That included recommendations for next steps, and we'll be talking about all of that over the course of this presentation.
All right.
So yes, I will now hand it over to the man that did the lifting on this. So yes, Dave, go for it.
Appreciate it. All right, thanks, Fritz. I appreciate that. Now, I know, I'm sure a lot of you may already know a lot about the site history of the site, but there might be folks tuning in, or I do cover a little bit on the site history, just to kind of reiterate that and kind of give an overall sense of kind of a basis of where we're coming from here when we started our review. This is a vicinity map of the project. The Denver Federal Center is here in the center of the screen. You can see 6th Avenue, Kipling on the east, Union Boulevard on the west, and the northwest parcel that we did do our desktop review is circled in blue here. And the initial phase of development that has been proposed by the developer is outlined in red. Most of that is on the southern portion of the parcel. A portion of that redevelopment is into West 4th Avenue here. But vicinity-wise, you can see to the south, another distinguishing feature is the RTD rail line, and also to the south of that is the St. Anthony's Hospital that was formerly part of the Denver Federal Center that was built in 2006 or so. This is the recent Kimley Horn Grading and Infrastructure Plan that was presented to us as far as the latest iteration of what the developer is planning to do, primarily on the southern portion of the site. This just kind of shows they're proposing some infrastructure consisting of reconfiguration of 4th Avenue, a roundabout, and then interior roads, and grading that would cut and fill certain areas of the site. And then this would support their development of their mixed use, what I understand is their mixed use residential and retail type development. We superimposed and highlighted the proposed district utilities on the Kinley Horn base map, and you can kind of see the proposed utilities where they're slated to go in under this current iteration, and it is subject to change in the future, but this is the latest iteration that we viewed. The water line is shown in blue. The sanitary sewer lines are shown in yellow, and then this plan called for a sewer force main line kind of back to the south and up Route Street, and it also included a sewer lift station, and this is shown in pink. So the kind of those three segments of the utilities are shown on this map. In relation to also kind of these areas on the site, which I'll go into more detail here in a minute. These colors here on the north represent the existing land cover areas that are designated north of the site that have ongoing requirements with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. The GSA put out a nice drone video. If you're interested, I probably won't go through it and show this at this point, but there's a nice drone video that shows certain perspectives of the site. But this screen capture shows some certain aspects of the site kind of shown on the maps. This was done 2 years ago, but it's essentially the same currently. You can kind of see the conditions of the southern parcel, which is currently proposed for development, and also portions of the northern property where the existing landfill cover areas are on the site. And just touching on some of the site history, just for folks that may not know, previous to 1941, the site was undeveloped, was used for agricultural purposes. The property was sold during World War II to the U.S. government for uses of the Denver Ordnance Plant, which manufactured gun cartridges, shells for the war effort, and it was a fairly large operation that operated for the duration of World War II. After World War II, the Denver Ordnance Plant then transitioned to the Denver Federal Center, and by 1992, there were as many as 27 federal agencies there, and which was all properties on the site were administered by the General Services Administration. Environmentally, a consent order was signed in 1997 between the CDPHE and GSA regarding the environmental issues at the 59-acre parcel. And the current status is that the Northwest landfill area still remains under land use controls and under certain specified conditions under the LCA, which is the landfill covered area, and also to the south of that is the maintain existing land cover area, the MELCA, which is essentially the boundaries of the landfill material that was left in place and to be managed into the future for long term at the site, which is primarily north of 4th Avenue. The CDPHE issued no further action determinations for most of the remainder of the site between 2006 and 13. Groundwater across the entire 59-acre parcel falls under a land use restriction, which I will get into more of these details in a moment. And then recently in 2003, the GSA sold that property to the developer. As part of the environmental investigations out here at the 59-acre parcel, they subdivided the property into various different investigation areas. So they broke it into various historical use designations, and this is kind of a summary of those various designations in the proposed development area, which I will go into in more detail. This is the current environmental status of the property. This is a map that kind of shows those no further action areas shown in peach or red. And then the landfill cover areas here on the north represented by this brown and this blue, which represents the areas currently not under no further action, which requires long-term O&M procedures and other requirements if any activity is proposed at that site by the designated owner of that property. And what we did was we overlaid the proposed district utilities over this area to kind of see where at least the initial phase of development, where the proposed utilities are going. And you can kind of see most of it is proposed in the no further action areas, and then but a portion of the water line and sewer line is extended into the MELCA portion of the landfill cover area, which I will describe in further detail. And again, the entire property is subject to land use control where groundwater is restricted for certain conditions and requirements. Just to mention, there's other Denver Federal Center contamination in the vicinity of the site. That was not the focus of our desktop review. But just to mention it here, so if we could put things in context, I know that might be a topic of discussion. But you can kind of see, Deborah Saunders Center has a couple groundwater plume contamination plumes associated with various former activities at the site. This is a chlorinated solvent plume that goes across, impacted quite a distance and across Kipling Street, where they actually, they put in a reactive barrier wall and they're doing soil remediation, the groundwater remediation of the stormwater pond. There's also a plume on the south end of the site that's a mix of petroleum hydrocarbons and chlorinated solvents as well. But the overall groundwater gradient is to the northeast, and which is a down gradient of the 59-acre northwest parcel, which is up in, just let me show this here with my laser pointer. The northwest parcel is up in this portion of the property here. Just to run through quickly a couple historic aerial photos, just put things in perspective. In 1937, there's nothing on site. It was ranch land. In 1941, the Denver Ordnance Plant began construction in January of that year. This is a aerial photo from July of that year. Obviously, they moved very quickly in building this plant. And you can kind of see the boundary of the northwest parcel up in this corner of the site. And you can already see that most of the historical Denver Ordnance Plant buildings were built in initial phases of construction there. You can kind of see some of those activities there.
Can you go over a little bit more detail? Okay, so there was the plan, and I know you touched on it a little bit here, relationship to where the current streets are and.
Yeah, definitely. Let me try to zoom in a little bit here. So you can kind of see this is looking west. This is Kipling Street, and this is what would become 6th Avenue. Union is not there in 1941. So you can kind of get an orientation. The northwest parcel is basically, my laser pointer again, is here in this area of the site. You can see there's no development, obviously.
And the south parcel.
And the south, yeah, the south parcel is, let me just zoom in here. It's a laser pointer is causing this to be slow. 1 second. So the southern parcel is basically here.
For an amateur historian, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. Saying they were already building a plant in July of 41.
Right, yes.
Well,
That's
somebody
correct.
didn't declare war until.
No, but
December of 41.
history was that Europe was already at war. We were supplying Britain at the time, Lend-Lease, supporting other allies in that effort. So pretty much everything was geared going that way anyway until war was officially declared in December 1941. So
They were ramping up.
they were actually, part of history is that they were actually talking about building this plant as early as 1938, but it actually didn't happen until 1941.
This road on the south side, Alameda.
Correct. This is Alameda kind of going around
There you
here.
go.
It's kind of hard with lack of landmarks today, but yes, this is mostly agricultural use. Obviously, a lot has changed in 80 years.
Alameda has the same curve that it does now.
Correct. That's right. It follows the same path, same with 6th Avenue and Kipling. So it shares that same orientation. On here. So this is 1954. So this is after Denver Ordnance Plant had ended operations, and when Denver Federal Center came on, and you can kind of see some activity in the northwest area. You can start to see some of the landfilling activities that were occurring on the north, where as they tore down buildings within the Denver Ordnance Plant and rebuilt the Denver Federal Center, they disposed of a lot of construction debris and burned a lot of materials in this northern area. There were burn pits, there were disposal pits, and you can kind of see some of that activity going on here in this northern area. So some of the historical Denver Ordnance Plant facilities are still there at this time.
You indulge me another personal question. Let's see the map. This building right here. It's now called Building 85. What was it back then?
I don't know the answer to that. That was kind of outside of our study area. I can find out for you though. So I apologize, I don't have an answer exactly what that particular building was used for. Specifically, but what they did here back there was a coal plant, there's a railroad spur in here that they would get deliveries of coal and they would stockpile coal. There's a steam plant, there's lots of steam lines running in underneath and between buildings in between here. I'm not exactly sure if this is the power plant or not, but I apologize, I don't know that. But there's various historical facilities here related to that, those operations there.
The triple line, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to comment, but that triple line that sort of slanted the small bumps, those are the munition filters.
Right,
Correct, right. So there were canning plants, there was also other storage related, for, powder canning areas, and so other support facilities related to these areas, in addition to various different landfills. They're parked all around this, predominantly in the northern end of the site here.
I also see a line that's running down there, kind of right where your pointer's at. And I understand if there was a tunnel that went in there and they backfilled that with contamination.
I did not see documentation that was backfilled with contamination, but I did see that there was an investigation trying to find that tunnel,
Yeah,
but they were never successful in actually identifying that tunnel.
okay.
But supposedly that is in the history that there was a tunnel of some sort. But what actually it was used for, that is unknown, at least during my.
Yeah, there's tunnels all over that federal center.
Right, but it is known that, construction debris, maybe, other related to construction, there could be potentially materials related to electrical PCBs, transformers, general construction debris. Who knows if there's organic materials in there as well. The actual disposal is not well documented. That wasn't standard procedure back then. But it's predominantly related to construction debris.
What about chemicals from the ordinance plan?
There's no documentation of chemical disposal there, whether that was a normal practice or not. That is not in the records that I was able to see. Whether that made sense as far as disposal of gunpowder, use solvents, that's really hard to know. That's not really seen in the documentation.
I understand this was regulated under the US Department of something, and that was need to know basis of what they put in there and what they didn't put in there. We can't, I've tried to get information about that, and apparently they won't release that to this day. What was actually stored in there.
Okay, yeah, well, I haven't viewed any specific documentation
Yeah, that's fine.
regarding that, and I haven't put any inquiries into that, but
Okay.
I appreciate that extra information. There's a question in the back there.
Well, so my name's John Kleinsmith. I'm the Regional Environmental Manager for GSA. And I conducted probably most of the investigations that are out here with regards to the questions on the pits. And the gentleman's right, primarily it's construction debris or waste from operations at the Denver Federal Center. I found tax records from the 50s. I found off-spec topo sheets from the USGS. Most, if not all of those, I'll call them dumps, because that's what they were excavated, trenched, sampled with a laundry list of analytical suites. And with regards to the tunnel, I worked there 25 years. I've not heard about a tunnel. That doesn't mean that there wasn't some sort of activity of that nature, but in general, it was either waste from the operations of the Denver Federal Center or construction waste from demoing buildings.
Then what did the Defense Department do with the waste from the munitions plant?
So the only,
Just a minute. Jay, would you like to invite him up to the table?
Yeah, please.
GSA is on. the
GSA,
agenda.
Yeah.
If you'd like to come sit at the table.
We all come.
so the only location that we found waste from the Denver ordinance plant was along McIntyre Gulch, right in this location. And we found spent munitions, bullets and cartridges and things of that nature that had basically been thrown in an incinerator and then subsequently disposed of. I also don't know the specific name or number of that building.
85.
Well, it is today 85.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I don't know.
But back in the day, they had a whole different numbering system from all of the buildings. And it's been subsequently been expanded. Over here is the heating plant. There's 60,000 linear feet of steam line on the Denver Federal Center and over 150 steam vaults. And there was approximately 1,400 feet of steam line removed from this area and about 20 steam vaults removed as part of the remediation effort for obtaining a no further action from the state of Colorado.
Where did they remove it to?
We took it to the local municipal landfill. I don't know if it's mine.
Sounded good. You're it.
So all the waste that is generated on the Denver Federal Center is manifested since the consent order's gone in place, is manifested and it's sent either to a RCRA subtitle C landfill, which is your municipal landfill, or a subtitle D landfill.
I've got a slide that kind of highlights the activities of the Northern area. We can maybe talk about that too when we get to
And
that.
while we're on the subject there, where was the Hayden mountain up there was an artillery range?
The
Where
artillery
were they
range,
shooting that from?
yeah, so the artillery range is further to the west.
Right, it's
Yeah.
the mountain, or green,
Where Green Mountain, Green
Yeah.
Mountain was the location that they
Right.
exploded.
and they, to this day, they still find
Yeah,
unexploded
they still
ordnance.
find, they still find unexploded.
So where was it being fired from on?
Probably,
Camp George was.
yeah, Camp George West and Golden.
Tell you what, I mess you guys up, and on the other hand, I'm thinking about it when I see it. The one I was just pointing out up there, 85.
Mhm.
Okay, my personal connection. I'm a retired federal employee, so I worked for 40 years in building 85. And so I got a question, a couple relating to that. And before all this construction started, I was still a young pup. There were people that were telling me, oh, by the way, that hospital that they're gonna be building in a few years? Or anyway, that area. Like, did you know that was Department of Agriculture? And they had little animals out there. They were studying wolves. And they were putting anthrax in them. These animals all had anthrax. And now they buried all the carcasses out there. Well, talk about third hand hearsay, I don't know, I'm hearing about it, from the old guys, well, they're all dead. And I'm almost dead. So, your story.
So the answer is yes. There were anthrax studies on the Denver Federal Center,
Oh, really?
but there was an incinerator that was used to basically take care of the animals that have been impacted. That is further south of the property that is currently being discussed, and in actuality is part of where St. Anthony is currently located. It's one of the 90s series buildings, which doesn't mean anything to you, but operationally it's down
Down
in there.
The other question, I've been retired for 10, 12 years now. After I retired, the story was, you're hearing secondhand through, other retirees, was that building 85 got closed for a while. And the story that we're hearing, second, third, fourth hand, was that you kids were walking through the site over the years and you tracked something into building 85, and now we have to close down 85.
So in the summer of 2016, GSA was remodeling building 85 for Honor, right? Honor. And they had a hard wall in between 2/3 of the facility and 1/3 of the facility. So Honor was still in 1/3 of the facility. We were doing air sampling in the building. A lot, I'll just say it that way, a lot of air sampling, and we ended up getting a couple of detections of asbestos fibers by TM analysis. Based on that, we asked for corrective action by the contractor to see what was going on. We got a subsequent one, and because of that, we took wipe samples in the space. There isn't any standard for wipe samples. It's a plus minus situation. We detected asbestos fibers in a location, and we detected asbestos fibers on a vacuum. Because of that and amount of caution, we had the tenants move to building 41 temporarily. And we cleaned the entire space, wiped down the entire space, and they never went back in the space until after the space had been remodeled. So the answer is yes.
Filling in all sorts of blanks. You know more than I did. It's like, wow, interesting. Well, I guess my last question, you talked earlier about the years ago, and again, I didn't know what happened back then. That's why I'm asking. All I remember was the stuff about there was some sort of contamination that was going downhill. And they were putting in an underground retaining wall along Kipling to prevent whatever, I know you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, you mentioned.
And what was that all about? And is that
So in
still?
1991, CDPHE issued a compliance order to federal highways for known groundwater plume. That groundwater plume primarily was 111 TCA with daughter products or associated products of 1,4-dioxane, TCE and 1,1-DCE. Federal highways was not reacting as quickly as CDPHE required. Federal highways was issued a notice of violation in 1996 and GSA was issued a compliance order to basically prevent contaminated groundwater from leaving the federal facility. And I think we got it in April and we had 6 months to install a system. We put in a funnel and gate system using zero veil and iron and 4 cells or gates. It's about 1,100 feet long with 4 40-foot gates. And it was the 3rd type system in the United States. And that was used to basically treat the contaminant before it left the facility. I don't know the exact dollar, but I do know when I calculated the volume of contaminant that had been treated, we were talking like a gallon or 2. And my boss at the time was going to our central office to discuss why we spent all the money. And he decided not to say that we spent, let's say $5 million to treat a gallon of TCE or 111 TCE. But yes, in 1996. And that's basically here. There are 3 plumes, a lower plume, a middle plume, and then a northern plume. And we've studied, other than the federal highways plume, we've spent many of your tax dollars trying to locate the sources and not been able to.
I understand that.
But in paperwork that was from 1945 during the process of, in a sense, mothballing the facility, there's a document that said that TCE was used. It's a solvent. And so GSA has 2 TCE plumes, but we don't know the source. And federal highways is a 111 TCA. And they're all solvents.
On that same subject, I understand, where I come from, I lived right across the street from the Federal Center for 35 years. My wife worked at Building 53.
Okay.
And I've been down in all those tunnels down there, they go down several stories. The question I have is, to this day, is any of the, understand that there's a nuclear reactor on site?
Yes.
Has anything, nuclear rods or anything been buried up in that northern section over the years?
Had paperwork, hold on. I wrote something on that.
Nuclear reactor rates are required to be completely taken off the federal center.
Yeah, no. So,
Asking a question.
yeah, no, that's fine. So the reactors, USGS is under an NRC license.
Right.
And any activity associated with the reactor is managed by USGS under their license. But with regards to radionuclides, the only location that has the potential for, let's call it a release, right? Is the eastern side of the facility, which is down gradient from the reactor that is here in building 15. So back in 1999 or so, GSA conducted an investigation of what we call Area 14 North. At that time, the analytical suite for GSA to collect for one sample was about $3,500. It included radionuclides. in that area, basically kind of this area right here, we collected over 900 samples for analysis, of which approximately 175 were groundwater, approximately 70 was sediment, over 500 soil samples and 130 surface water samples. And based on all of that, basically the state did not require GSA to continue using radionuclides as a standard in our analytical suite. However, in 2015, there was a location next to one of the buildings in which there was a rumor that somebody had done something with something associated with radionuclides.
Rumors.
And we conducted some very small amount of tests in that area. But other than that, there is no known leaks of radioactive material on the Denver Federal Center. The area that you're dealing with,
Right.
in the northwest corner was called, the first investigation completed on the Denver Federal Center was IA-08. It's literally the area of the landfill north of North Avenue. That was conducted prior to the radioactive work, but because there was no knowledge based on the historic information provided by all the various tenants, as they've indicated, there's 27 different federal tenants over the period of time. In 1998, we generated a document called the Prehistoric RFI Addendum. Based on that document, we identified over 600 features that had the potential to contaminate the environment. GSA has probably the strictest consent order that anybody has in the state of Colorado. If you talk to Rick Mers, who's currently the manager of the Hazardous Materials Division, not only do I have to worry about contamination, I have to worry about a site that might have contaminated. And so we've investigated, well, our environmental database has over 202 million records of analytical data and probably somewhere between 25,000 and 50,000 different sample locations. So and I'm sorry that I'm intruding. I don't know what I've read the report and I don't know what the final outcome of their discussions are, but we spent a lot of money investigating the area, obtained a no further action from the state of Colorado. And I understand the emergent contaminants are concerned, and I have some discussion points for that. But based on that work, in my opinion, there's no issue for you to do what you need to do.
My, I guess, last question at this point,
Oh, that's fine.
you also house, ice core samples from all over
Yes.
the world.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming sometimes they melt off?
Nope,
Nope, none of them do?
nope, because they would lose all of that research that they've done. They have their own generator.
Okay.
USGS manages that. In fact, we are doing a project on behalf of USGS to update the ice core lab system and provide additional power.
And then none of them have been dumped anywhere?
Nope.
That's the question I had there. Okay, let's proceed then.
I will.
Sorry.
No, that's good. There might be some other discussion points here later in the proposal. Presentation. Just where I left off, I just overlaid the proposed district utilities on top of the historical area photo, just to kind of see where, even though a lot of these areas have been remediated and have obtained those further actions, there are certain areas that may have encountered, buried steam lines that weren't removed, such as down in this area of this quadrant to the site. But just as general perspective, in historical terms, this is where the district utilities are proposed to be put. Just going through the subsequent years, 1963, it looks like some of the activities as far as landfilling, excavation kind of slowed down a little bit, but there's probably still some activities going on at that time. 71, somewhat similar. And then 1994, you can kind of see some of the activities and changes at the site. The RTD bus station actually put in a parking lot here and a portion of I-8 or the Northwest landfill area that has currently been removed since then, but a period of time they did park on top of that landfill area. And this is about when environmental activities started happening and some remediation and demolition started to happen after 1994. And jumping ahead to kind of 2017, almost current conditions, we kind of see a lot of the buildings have been removed. The parking lot with RTV was removed. The light rail station has gone in, and we've gone in early 2000 to 2013 to 2014 timeframe, and the St. Anthony's Hospital went in about 2006. So just summarizing some of the document review that we did. There's a whole host of documents, historical environmental documents that we reviewed. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but this kind of gives you a sense of the volume of documentation that's occurred within the focus area here on the site. The various different investigations going back in time. I have effectively, there's 4 pages of documents here, but I won't go into each one of these just due to the time of the presentation. But essentially what this all condensed down to, I tried to summarize exactly kind of what all those documents kind of led to. As I mentioned before, most of the parcel was designated into various different investigation areas. IA8 is the landfill area. There's an East IA8 that has since obtained a no further action. There's a West IA10, 12, 11, 17, and 6, et cetera, as shown on the map. The northern areas here, or as I mentioned, are mostly the landfill or the landfill cover areas and then these area 10 and east area 08 on the east. And then the southern areas are primarily consisting of investigation areas 12, 11, 7, and 6. And I'll kind of highlight each one of those here subsequently. So this is kind of a historical summary that was presented in the documentation of all the investigation that occurred at IA8, which is mostly the landfill area and plus a portion of the eastern site where they did actually do some remediation, excavation, and removal of some impacted soils on the east side of the site. The CPHE, issued NFA for this eastern IA8 portion in 2011. And then I'm going to summarize a portion of the landfill areas, which currently have a land use controls in place for essentially this portion of the site. There are certain activities restricted. Activities must conform with the long-term operation and maintenance plan on the site and for the site and materials management plan for the site, which has certain requirements for long-term monitoring by the owner, which would, there is a recommendation later in the presentation about who exactly is that owner after the developer is gone, who that ownership transfer as far as property and utility right of ways. We had a recommendation to add some clarification on that, but effectively, there are documents that control activities on the site. Most activities have to be reviewed and approved by the CDPHE before it actually happens. These documents don't necessarily restrict development on this portion of the property, even though currently none is currently proposed, but future phases may be proposed. There are certain rules that development must follow according to those documents. But the groundwater use restriction applies to the entire 59-acre parcel, not just the landfill areas. This is IA10, which is just the east of the landfill areas. Also, this is kind of a history of investigation and remediation activities. They did excavate asbestos impacted soils, some chemical impacted material, some coal seams. Old building foundations were left in place and covered by vegetation, but this entire site was granted no further action determination by the CDBHE in 2011 and 2012. There are certain areas where pHs and asbestos may still be encountered as a possibility because there were some materials left in place. There's a bridge that did go across here that beneath that bridge footing, there might be residual materials in place. But that possibility or potential of residual materials may exist, even though the site has that no further action determination.
A question for you. That coal seam was part of the Denver formation, so it was below the alluvial material?
No, the coal seams actually transported coal in
Okay,
on and
Right, so it might have been a seam, like a deposit of placed coal, and that would have been buried,
Yeah.
that
So
maybe it looked like.
a layer of
Layer,
coal,
right,
probably fragmental coal.
That's probably a better description, is a
I was
layer.
about to say, as far as I know, there's no coal in the Denver Formation as part of the area.
And
Correct, it's described as a coal seam in the documents, but you're correct, I would agree with you there.
I have a question. Can I comment during his conversation?
Oh, sure.
I'm inclined to be loosey-goosey, because I'm interested.
We're learning.
Okay, and I just, so, with regards to underneath the bridge, we work very diligently to remove all the contamination to the best of our ability. There's actually, I think, one grid left underneath the bridge that has asbestos contamination associated with it because it came down to timing. In general, we sampled everything and got clean closure with regards to any other location on the site. So the comment that, yeah, there could be asbestos and pH contamination below grade, I can't dissuade that. But with the number of soil borings and excavations we removed, until you dig, you're never gonna know what you're gonna find.
Mhm.
And on the steam lines, the red line is the edge of where the steam lines were removed in one of your previous conversations. So the location that you indicated that may have steam lines, those have been removed.
I also understand that there was an airport,
There wasn't an airport, there was an airstrip.
airstrip. Well, they still landed planes there.
In the southeast corner, VOR used to land planes associated with their operations, is all I know.
You know what they were bringing in and taking out?
I assume engineers. I mean, you know,
That's fine, I just. was
yeah, I mean,
curious.
I honestly don't know. I just know that there's a strip. If you look at photos from the activists associated with the Southern RTD remediation activity, you see large, I'll call them drum-like pieces of, and they're actually concrete. Those are cores that were used for strength testing, stress testing, and for the dams out of building 56 as part of the dam construction during the age, you know, and timing wise, if you think about it, that part of the facility was, you know, dams were the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so the west side of the facility started not being used and became, in a sense, a dump for construction and other waste. So
I'm just moving on to another investigation area here, I-12, which is just to the south of West Fourth Avenue here. There was lots of investigation, kind of represented here as early as 2000 through to 2006, 2015, 2016. There were remediation activities here as well, actually in 2009, excuse me. There were excavation activities of asbestos, some other coal, residual coal, PAHs, and metals related to this investigation area. Pentachlorophenol was detected in one of the wells in this area, but was later determined not to be an issue. And that particular issue in groundwater was granted a no further action from the state in 2009. And for the overall site south of where the Melka is, the state issued a no further action in August of 2011. The north part of I-12, as I mentioned, is still under this ongoing long-term O&M plan and materials handling plan.
and the PCP was associated from offsite. So when it comes to the groundwater restriction, the upper 100 feet, that was issued by CDPHE because of potential contamination coming from off property. Not because of groundwater contamination emanating from Denver trails.
So I understand that's from some unknown site to the northwest of the DSC here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tennis court facility, there's a tire facility. I mean,
Who
you know,
knows?
we have pH, MTBE, PCE, a variety of different chemicals coming on the property from offsite. And we are not required to do any remedial action, but because of that, the state required a 100-foot restriction for groundwater use.
Also understand there's an underground river. I know that because my neighbor is coming right through my neighborhood, across the street into the Federal Center.
I wouldn't say there's a river, I would say there's probably a more permeable channel in the aquifer and allows water to flow faster.
Well, there was 23,000 gallons in my neighbor's house this last rainfall.
And I wouldn't disagree with that.
Okay.
But
And understand, but what I was gathering at is I also understand that that flows down. And you were saying that some things weren't, they don't know what it was. But I understand that there was problems or contaminations running down Sixth Avenue in an underground that river curves that way.
So we released water out of retention pond 3, which is on the north side of the
Okay.
facility. And in the process of doing that, basically exhausted the ability for the channel south of Sixth Avenue to carry the water. And that water ran down that
Underground.
ditch, no, on surface,
Okay.
and flooded the cloverleaf and the associated soils in that vicinity. Subsequently, we've changed our practice in discharging water out of retention pond 3 and also corrected the flow out of retention pond 3 to try to, in the 60s, when Union Street was developed, there was an agreement made between the city of Lakewood and the Denver Federal Center for stormwater runoff. And I don't know, the unfortunate part is nobody has all the paperwork,
Nobody does. Yeah.
but it ran through those ponds, like that little pond and a couple other ponds, and then into retention pond 3, and then it's supposed to flow.
Where's 3?
3?
You already said it, but I forgot.
3 is right there.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and so it flows down this V-ditch, which is the south end of the Mecla, into this 1, 2, 3, water only kind of stays in this, and then it discharges off. And it's supposed to flow along Sixth Avenue and then kind of go back into Lakewood drainage. And I don't know when, but prior to I got there, somebody did something that changed the system and the flow doesn't work correctly. What it's really supposed to do is flow under Sixth Avenue and go into Lakewood Gulch.
I also understand, I don't know if I read it in your report, that there's supposedly 4 groundwater retention wells on the property. Existing wells right now. Have they been tested at all? And according to your thing, they haven't been?
Recently.
Okay, I don't know if they,
But historically, they've been tested.
They're drinking water wells.
okay, we tested for PFAS?
PFAS has been tested on the Denver Federal Center as part of our NPDS permit.
In this property though?
There is no cause for us to sample for PFAS in this.
Not
property.
you, but the developers.
In my opinion, the area was used in the 50s, 60s, and 70s prior to the development, or I want to say not prior to the development, but Teflon, which is one of the main sources of PFAS.
Yep.
Based on the historical information provided to us by the various agencies, there, to my knowledge, either none or insignificant quantities of that type of material stored in the area, and therefore there is no cause to think that PFAS have contaminated the area. We've sampled PFAS on the east side of the facility, which is at the downgrading side of all of this. And based on that analytical work, EPA did not require us to add PFAS into our NPDS permit for discharge from our interceptor treatment system.
Okay, which is question had.
No, I understand it's an emerging chemical, and I can tell you that Denver water has PFAS in it. We've sampled that because under current conditions with Metro wastewater, we have to sample for PFAS prior to discharging our wastewater in, from our mechanical systems. And none of those systems fail for PFAS unless there's some alternative contamination, like we had a compressor leak into the system and it failed.
Oh, we are Denver water though, so.
Well, I know, I understand that, but it has PFAS in it below current
Okay.
acceptable levels.
All right. right, just summarizing some of the investigation areas, I-11. There was a former landfill that was excavated and completely remediated and excavated off-site. There was some PHs in the documentation that was supposedly left behind some of the old roads. Some of the practices back then was to distribute used oil, oil the roads to keep dust suppression down. That was a very common practice used it pretty much everywhere. So there is a possibility within this area, there could be some PHs still on the site. There was no additional remedial actions required by the state, and the state issued an NFA for the entire I-11 in 2011 and 2013. As I mentioned, there could be some residual PHs remaining at the site. I-17, which is just a little bit, is south of I-12. And there, if you remember from the aerial photo, there was a building here. There were some poles, stockpiles. This is kind of at the end of the railroad spur. There was a variety of remediation that occurred within this particular parcel. The buildings were removed. The sewage pump and lift station, a grease trap was removed. A 500-gallon hydraulic oil UST was removed in 2000. And then site 806 landfill and coal storage areas were removed as well, to the satisfaction of the state, which issued no further actions in 2006, 9, and 11 for the various different areas within this designated area. And again, as a general statement, even though with the extent of the investigation that the possibility existed, some of those residual materials may still be on site. I-6, which is in the southeast corner of the parcel, related to some of these historical buildings. This is the area that was mentioned that there might be residual steam lines, but if those have been removed, maybe that lessens the possibility of when the proposed forest main goes through this particular area. But it is a possibility, but if it's been all removed, then it shouldn't be an issue. But it is something to keep an eye out for during construction or future maintenance or repair by the district. There was a documented issue with vinyl chloride being detected in one of the wells here, which was subsequently, they actually went to the step of injecting some in situ chemical oxidant to try to deal with that residual vinyl chloride. It was only detected in one well, and it was determined not to be an issue or concern after that, and the state issued another, the CDBG issued a no further action in 2009. And again, whether or not buried steam lines will be encountered may or may not. But again, as a general statement, residual asbestos-containing materials could be encountered as well as a possibility. But a lot of that was remediated out previously.
You might point out the munition storage bunkers are figured there.
Yeah, so in general, the last storage bunker was removed in about 2000. As part of GSA's asbestos investigation in this area, which was prior to the promulgation of the regulation in 2006. You'll see those lots. Those are 100 by 100 foot lots. The entire facility was broken into 100 by 100 foot lots and then subsequently broken up into 8 1,250 square foot areas. As part of the investigation for the primary area that we're discussing that's within the railroad and south of North Avenue, GSA had about 500 grids in that area, and we collected, not only did a grid by grid inspection or a couple of different directions, collected soil samples in those, and then each grid had 4 3 foot long, 3 foot deep, 2 foot wide trenches in them, and they were all inspected. And then based on the analytical data from asbestos, there's about 1,000 asbestos samples collected just in this one area. We remediated those, and there was approximately 5,500 cubic yards of friable asbestos contaminated soil removed, and about 16,500 cubic yards of non-friable asbestos contaminated soil removed. One of the bunkers, and I don't know which one, we excavated the 38 feet below grade. At that time, the state did not have a native soil exemption, and we kept getting a hit for asbestos in the soil sample. Now today, that if you hit native material, the state will give you a buy-off and say that you're not, something else is causing the problem. An example on the southern RTD problem, we actually had running water across the bedrock soils. And the asbestos we were detecting was coming from the water, not from the soil.
By the way, for the interest of the people here, asbestos has a very peculiar definition because it's very difficult to identify the mineral asbestos, which has a specific chemical formula or range of chemical formulas. So EPA has a fiber dimensions definition of the asbestos, and that basically is a ratio of the width and then the length. If the fiber has a certain length to width ratio, it's called asbestos, whether it's the asbestos mineral or not.
And then more recently, so that's a kind of a very high level summary of some of the historical remediation investigation occurring at the site. More recently, with the sale of the property, the developer did engage a Vertex to look at do a similar background review, and they presented their own set of recommendations for specific to the proposed development on the southern area of the site. And Vertex did a supplemental soil investigation as part of that, and which consisted of various soil borings and test pits to test various locations of the site. This is kind of the same investigation, but kind of overlaid with the proposed district utilities. In total, they did 24 test pits, roughly 3 by 10 by roughly 10 feet deep. They only encountered groundwater in test pit in grid A4, which is right about that 10 foot. So that was the shallowest level they encountered groundwater. They did 58 soil borings. In the test pits, they reported no indication of suspect asbestos materials in those test pits. And all the soil samples were collected and they were tested for VOCs, pHs, metals, asbestos, and pesticides. This is kind of a summary of their detections in soil. They did not test groundwater, but they had some some hits above residential screening criteria for benzoate pyrene, slightly above the standard. That was in their report attributed to exhaust fumes or kind of background sources. And then there were also scenes of arsenic, but they were below background levels. So even though there were detections of various different kinds of VOC or SVOCs, metals, they were not above the state CDPHE screening standards. And at least for the exceedance in benzoate pyrene, they felt that they described that either most of those locations would be covered by building footprints or excavated or moved during construction, that they would no longer be a exposure risk to anyone on site after construction. So that indicates there's at least, although maybe low levels, there still could be residual benzoate pyrene at site or pHs at the site potentially. That was effectively their extent of their soil investigation. We took it, we looked at the developer's geotechnical study just to try to get a gauge on where more recent depth of groundwater levels are. And we plotted the geotechnical borings, which did have depth of water data with it. And it did indicate that the depth of groundwater in the northeast corner of the property was roughly about the 10 foot below ground surface level. So that put it within the area of the proposed depth of the sanitary sewer line. So there's a potential for maybe certain segments of construction to encounter groundwater during construction. And that could be, and if that is the case, that could present some issues as far as pulling a groundwater dewatering permit and then dealing with the permitting process and the potential contamination issues related to historical contaminants and potentially naturally occurring contaminants that might be occurring there that still have to be dealt with if either in the future that the district is having to deal with that.
So Scott?
Yep.
Was that test pit next to retention pond 1?
It's right off by where the wetland was up there.
Yeah, so
It's right in the lowest point.
I would assume that the water in that location is caused by the fact that basically you've got surface water flowing off of Union into that retention pond.
Correct. Across all that property.
Well, no, I'm talking about, so this is an old V ditch.
Right,
The
okay, down the
drains,
V ditch,
yeah, drains, and there's a pond here.
right,
So the reason that we're getting water at that location is basically it's a recharge zone. So I would assume with the construction that they're gonna probably get rid of that retention pond, and the goal hopefully would make it so that you don't have to deal with water in the future.
So one of the geotechnical borings here did have an indication of depth to water at 12 feet, whether that's a recharge area.
Yeah.
The fact remains that if an excavation has to be dewatered, whether it's surface water that's migrated into groundwater, it's technically still considered groundwater. It might be subject to a dewatering permit. So if it's not, hopefully it's a situation that is not an issue. Either it's limited in extent and it doesn't present itself as an issue, but it's just mentioned here as a potential issue either now or in the future, that if groundwater levels do increase, you know, it's just an issue that the district needs to be aware of, that it presents additional issues if encountered in the future.
Right, can I ask, do you know what time of the year, or did you say what time of the year those, it's for dug in the doors? Spring would obviously be different than fall.
Vertex would know the answer to
We
that.
did it in November.
So,
Dryer.
dryer,
dryer.
dryer.
And how far are you going with pipes? Josh, 15 feet?
I think
Not you're going, but
Yeah, there's some areas.
so
On
deeper than
the-
the
on the western
12
end.
or 10 feet or 12 feet,
Right,
you've
so
already gone.
as the ground surface rises to the west, the depth of groundwater increases. So the potential decreases to, you'll have any groundwater issues on the western or southwestern side of the site. It's just when the ground level kind of dips to the northeast that you might encounter, you might get closer to potential groundwater levels. And if, at least in this iteration of the utility plan, there was a sewer lift station proposed, maybe that's going to change in the future. But if that structure, although we didn't see exactly how deep they were planning to put that sewer lift station, you know, that the foundation of that structure might be into groundwater at that point too, which, you know, you're dealing with groundwater during construction or future maintenance, if that configuration remains in actuality.
John, how many groundwater samples were collected in this general area?
So there's approximately 34 wells in the vicinity, and GSA collected approximately 3,400 groundwater samples over 14 years, from 1999 to 2013.
So we have a lot of data.
The contaminant, you know, and I can't disagree with the gentleman that, you know, you may have to have a construction dewatering permit, but if there isn't any associated contamination, then literally it's a construction dewatering permit, and you dump the water into the surface.
That's not technically correct. Because of the site's contamination issues, the state requires additional assessment as to whether or not you're dealing with contaminated groundwater. It actually would fall under, instead of a standard construction dewatering permit, you'd probably be issued a remediation permit, just due to the fact of the proximity.
Is it you or is it you or water quality?
It's water quality. So because of the potential for area contamination in groundwater.
I'm sorry, who are you again?
I'm Rick Mers,
Who you
leader of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment.
Your state.
Yes, sir.
Well, come on up, sir. You're on the agenda as well for.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
I get up, you're in trouble.
One of these comfy chairs.
You made a wrong decision. There.
You guys okay?
It's okay.
But you're federal, right?
I'm federal.
Yeah.
You're trying, your state.
Yes, sir.
So who thinks offense?
Oh, okay.
Right in the middle there, right?
You're easier to
Sounds
shoot
good.
it. So I guess my point being is the Water Quality Control Division has very restrictive surface discharge requirements.
Yes.
They're very difficult standards to meet. Sometimes they're very low. And because of the known contamination, they require you, as part of the permitting process, to collect a influence screen sample, which requires a whole list of sampling. And unless you already have that data in hand to demonstrate what the conditions are, there's a whole specific list of analytes you have to analyze for VOCs, SVOCs, metals, 1,4-dioxane, you know, and anything else that they could add depending on history around the site. And if there's, as you mentioned, an upgrading source of groundwater contamination coming on site, that's going to elevate this permit to a remediation permit.
And, I mean, that's historical.
It doesn't matter from
And I understand what you're saying, that there's a process, but it is a process. It is an acceptable process and it is achievable.
Right, it's certainly, you can obtain the permit, it's not a problem to go through the steps to obtain the permit. Even if you have to operate under remediation permit, which would require you to treat the water before you discharge it to surface water, there is the undeniable fact that there's an added cost to that process.
And
And
I'm assuming that the developer is gonna be the one that's doing this.
during construction, however, in the future, if the district has to go in and do maintenance, realign something 20, 30 years from now, 10 years, whatever.
And if the retention pond has been removed, then the likelihood that there's the elevated water level to the conditions is, I won't say completely eliminated, but potentially minimal.
That would hopefully be the case. If the groundwater is never encountered, then it's not an issue.
But
But
I understand if it is encountered, it would have to be remediated at basically after that 1 year arc. Green Mountain Water.
that's the question is, exactly. So who holds that permit? If it's district activities, if it's, let's say you're repairing a line, you have to dewater, you're probably the permittee, and you know, the developer probably isn't around at that point. So that's a question, who's actually responsible, you know, for this potential added cost associated with that? So it could be in place. Now, if the groundwater is not there, then it's not a problem. There's no issue at all. But it's just that possibility, if it's encountered, just be, you know, to be aware of it, that's a possibility.
And if and we're using hypothetical.
Oh, I'm
Speaking right now, but if we had a water main break here and all of a sudden 400,000 gallons of water got pumped into the underground area and it all became contaminated. And according to your thing, it'd be like $1.50 a gallon to remediate that.
Well, that's for outside disposal
Yeah.
option, but you also pull a permit that theoretically might make it more attractive. You're dealing with that much.
We're using if scenarios.
Right, yeah, right.
And I'll go with your if scenario, having dealt with hundreds of thousands of gallons of water leaking from our pipes.
Sure.
And I can tell you that in general, it reaches the surface and goes down the storm drain. I mean, yeah, the answer is, there's always a possibility.
Right. Well, that's the if.
I understand.
If that,
But you also have to look at percentages at the end of the day, and I can tell you, we've had probably in the 25 years I've been at the Denver Federal Center, 50 to 75 water line breaks.
Yeah.
And
but you never had a water main break underneath this property that's contaminated and
I've had
it dumped.
it break all over the Denver Federal Center, in which the similar type of contamination with regards to the things that you're concerned about. And I can tell you that from a water standpoint, getting rid of the water is not an issue for us. I mean, generally it goes down the storm drain and it's gone.
The issue is not getting rid of the water, the issue is getting rid of contaminated water.
It's the water, in my opinion, is not gonna infiltrate into the groundwater and cause you that kind of problem.
But it could.
You've been talking hypotheticals all night,
Yeah.
Well,
and so, but I think the likelihood is more likely that, yeah.
We have to look at reality.
I can't disagree with you.
Okay.
So that was the most recent activity, 2023. I guess we can jump to my recommendations. We touched on some of these already during our discussions, but just to kind of go over them again and I would very much appreciate the added information.
Yes, definitely.
It's very helpful to this whole process. But you know, at the time of our report, we issued a series of recommendations dealing with emerging contaminants, maybe additional confirmation soil sampling around the proposed utility corridors, because, and I'll get into each one of these in more detail. The potential remaining buried steam lines and debris, which again, hopefully won't be an issue. Vapor sampling and barriers. Again, I'll touch on all these aspects in a moment. Potential future groundwater dewatering. The described landfill cover area cap modification that was discussed in the state comfort letter. The penetrating water line break scenario, which we just talked about, risk to, and another aspect is
The middle is.
potential risk to pipe integrity. Due to potential contamination, and just clarity on who's responsible for what. Number 10, potential geotypical considerations of utilities in the form of fill areas. And then the potential need for the district specific operations plan, just so it's in place, so workers into the future know there's potential special considerations in this area of the district. And then the last topic is consideration of additional sampling raised by some of the stakeholders during our draft review process. Let me just quickly go through emerging contaminants. The issue of PFAS was brought up. That's an emerging contaminant that is unfortunately a ubiquitous issue in a lot of places. We don't necessarily have site-specific information on the actual site. Same with 1,4-dioxane, that's sometimes known contaminant with landfills.
So
And
we've sampled for 1,4-dioxane 114 times. They've all been non-detect, and 57 of those have been below, the sample method detection limit was below the standard of 0.35.
How long ago?
2013.
right,
10 years?
so yeah, 10 years. So that's it. It'd be nice to review that, but I think having updated groundwater data would be behoove everyone, just to confirm. And a lot of this is based on confirmation, even though maybe the actual probability is low of it finding something, but just in the potential or confirmation might be beneficial to the district to just answer some of those questions. So at least that can be answered for them to make their decision.
I think this issue of emerging contaminants not being accessed on the property is extremely important.
Like,
It has.
It is.
So they've sampled for 1,4, they've sampled for PFAS.
10 years ago.
10 years ago, time, and plus,
So what's happened subsequent to the 10 years ago that would create a problem?
From a standpoint, it could be another release, it could be upgrading source, but the fact is, like during a dewatering situation, it doesn't matter where it comes from or when it occurred. The district will probably most likely have to deal with it and the cost to deal with it. That's kind of the only aspect. If, right, so it's a
And
question.
doesn't groundwater move? I mean, it doesn't stay stable. It moves all over the place.
Correct.
So today it could not be there, but tomorrow it could be over here.
plus you're dealing with regulations that have changed, you're dealing with testing standards that have changed. 10 years ago is, in my opinion, is out the window.
And 20 years from now,
Yeah, you can't go down the road, 20 years from now and say, well, look, there was a study, it was 10 years ago, before we approved this. That's not
and
gonna
laws change
that's
too.
not gonna wash.
So we did recommend that if it's feasible and if groundwater is there, potentially at the northeast corner of that southern site, that additional, groundwater samples be obtained to be analyzed for these constituents, in addition to getting updated data for VOCs, SVOCs, and metals, just to compare it to the historical data, just to get an updated current picture of what's going on there, and also gather the data that would satisfy a potential dewatering permit that would be required. So at least going into it, kind of where things stand as far as what the groundwater conditions are, and also confirming groundwater gradient and which, that's another useful kind of updated data set to get, is confirming the direction of groundwater, just to confirm exactly that is it still going to the east northeast, or has it changed in recent years?
And before you move on, Dave, we saw that there were 4 monitoring wells in the parcel that we're talking about here from GSA days. People with site-specific knowledge, do you know if those still exist, or the conditions?
we've not abandoned them to my knowledge.
Okay.
Right, I showed them on this particular map here is these 4 locations, and they were described as still being present in one of the Vertex reports. I think,
Are they still sampled on the LTM?
No, we've not sampled those since
Because
I have a no further action from the state of Colorado.
that's
And, but
which is the highest bar to attain?
we sampled down gradient of these, and I didn't look at the down gradient data. So I can do
But
that.
things do change.
No, I don't disagree with you, but under our current long-term monitoring program, we have a requirement to sample a number of wells across the entire facility, and we just finished our 2022 5-year review, so I can go,
It needs to be reviewed soon.
yes, not right this moment.
Not tonight.
And remember, GSA, you were responsible for monitoring this area. Am I
Yes.
Correct, okay, so now it's been sold,
You're not
I
responsible, man.
understand that, but,
all right?
and I don't know where the exact wells are, but we have wells
But yeah,
Yeah, but let me finish my
east
thought.
of your current property.
All right, so it's now been sold. Does that relinquish GSA from any further
actually,
monitoring or any liability or any responsibility for this? going forward?
So my understanding of CERCLA
Is what?
CERCLA's conservation, no, Comprehensive Environmental, Cleanup Liability Act.
Response,
Yeah, okay. We did a section, I think it's 107,
yes.
the exhibit A that was associated with the deed, which is the last report that they showed on their list of documents, lists all the known contamination that we had discovered as part of our investigative process. My understanding, if you encounter something that is not on that list, is potentially the responsibility of GSA, but I'm not a lawyer. And
gotta fight that, yeah.
there's some lawyers in the room, but it is our responsibility to tell you everything that we know.
That you know. That you know,
As of 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah.
As of some of the investigations were.
But in essence, you're kind of.
No activity
Shoveling the
in
puck
Ju-
down to the.
So let me ask this, let's say that you get data tomorrow, okay? And then it confirms what we've already known.
Mhm.
Then 10 more years pass. Will you want that data every like 10 years?
We're
Or
still
when
responsible
does
for
it- When does it end? Does it ever end?
We're still responsible for it forever, after the 1-year warranty.
And
We're still responsible for it.
I don't just, but Rick's question is basically, if Lincoln goes out and does some additional work and delineates that everything's to your satisfaction, are they done?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, there has to be an end.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at,
And all the data that we've collected to
By the way,
date.
this sounds like a debate for the board.
Okay,
At this point, we're
we're just getting
we're trying to
information.
get the information.
Okay, got it.
So I think we're arguing
So,
issues.
I think one item that's being like, glanced over is, we're quickly saying, these areas received a no further action. Understand that a no further action, especially out of GSA, it's residential, like, clean. All standards are met in all impacted media. That's like, if that is attained, then you're rewarded with a no further action. Okay,
Until
it's
something
the
happens.
highest bar, until a new release occurred
Yeah.
or, subsequent data indicates
Right,
otherwise. Okay,
that's the problem.
okay, okay,
Let him continue.
so no. And then what we're doing is we're following up, that an area which was thoroughly investigated, okay? But, we did the same procedures or process as Tri-Hydro is doing tonight. We looked at like Sanborn, aerials, we interviewed people, we, extracted generator knowledge, maps, we identified like features, potential source areas. And then we investigated all those. If we found anything, we then took that area and went out and investigated further. In order to get a no further action, you have to, not only, thoroughly investigate an area,
Easy.
But,
Yeah.
but also, delineate its full extent, both vertically and laterally. And then once once that has occurred, can only then you achieve a no further action status.
I understand all that.
So that was done. And, you know, even subsequent to, you know, remediations and removals, we still require, you know, performance monitoring, rebound, you know, confirming rebound testing. So you did remove a pocket of, you know, some PAH or some, you know, other contamination. GSA was still required to, after that removal action, to monitor, to ensure that nothing rebounds or we missed something. So after all of those steps and phases occur, we then issue the no further action. And if that's, you know, awarded, no further action is required.
Back to Art's question though. It's been sold, the property to Lincoln Properties. Your hands are washed of it as of this point?
Mine are, his is.
Yeah, we're regulating them still.
Okay, I mean, but
So the installations are all under, or they will be under some, you know, materials handling plan, materials management plan. Or, you know, you have to comply with the use restrictions that are out there. And that institutional control demands that CDPHE return to the site. Every, you know, I think it's like, for this case, it's every 3 years, it's either 3 or 2. Needs to go out there and inspect the cover, ask the questions, meet a facility rep out there, and, you know, determine compliance with each and every single use restriction that's listed.
okay, but after their 1 year quote warranty, it relies on Josh or Green Mountain Water. We're going to be liable, correct, for anything that goes on in that property in the
No.
realm of sewer or water or whatever
Okay,
you put in,
but
or whatever
you're-
they put in.
Yeah, but you're gonna come subsequent to that over excavation
Mhm.
with clean bedding, clean sidewalls,
We're
clean
not there.
everything.
Yeah.
They're gonna do that, and then if you ever have to come back, it's all new fill, it's clean material that will be in your trenches,
Down
Okay.
15 feet,
huh?
down 15 feet, how far are we going down?
Well, Denver Water's easement language is easement wide up to potentially 12 feet.
12 feet?
And that's their clean corridor. So they'd have to put a clean corridor according to Denver Water. For us to go through all that
We haven't hit that phase.
yet.
They haven't gotten there yet.
No,
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to take a step back real
The
quick.
plan is to over excavate. Whatever the depths are, that's a discussion,
Okay.
but plan is to over excavate.
You have in your report an RCRA 8 metals section,
Liquid metals.
right?
Okay.
Soil samples resulting from metals were either non-detected or detected below EPA, RSI, or residential land use, except for the following. You stated a few seconds ago, well, we did all this work and we gave out this and what we know and we know what we know and it's not gonna have any issues, so we gave it the land use recommendations. Arsenic,
Arsenic is naturally occurring in.
Barium.
Colorado, also naturally occurring.
psyllium, I'm pronouncing that right?
Yeah,
So there are things still yet to be tested, what we're getting from our
a lot of ifs out there.
heavy metals type of stuff.
The only metal that Vertex detected above standard was arsenic, and that's above the residential standard, but below the allowable state background.
the nationwide standard, but in Colorado, our formation is different than, you know, in California.
But and the answer is, those are naturally occurring, you're gonna detect them.
That's right,
And
that's
so
right.
they're below either background or below the standard that
So-
requires. cleaning.
So EPA came out here and collected hundreds and hundreds of samples.
I knew,
Yeah, and so they specifically to determine, the state's, arsenic condition, essentially. And although their standard, nationally is,
0.21 or something like that?
0.21, in Colorado, it's 11,
And we did a background study of the.
which is
different
22, right?
No, background study is 11 as well.
11 as well.
On the Denver.
In the city of Lakewood, when St. Anthony's was built, I had the opportunity to go on a 20-minute tour of the federal center of that St. Anthony's development with the EPA. The head of the EPA was here in town. And we laughed because 20 minutes ended up to be 2.5 hours. And we walked through there and he was telling me all the different contaminants that they found in their anthrax to, you name it. They had little midnight white, or men in their little white suits running all over that property. And he says, Randy, he says, to be honest with you, he says, this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's down there, that's the huge problem. And that was the north side of the federal center there. He said this was, now, don't quote me on this, but they were calling it a Superfund site. Is it a Superfund site?
No.
Okay, I've
No.
heard yes and no on the internet.
I've heard
It
both.
says it is, and some
Yeah.
says it isn't. So,
It is not.
okay,
It's never been listed as a Superfund.
It is
site.
not.
okay, I'm asking that question.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
It's under investigation, but they.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying that, that's what I was told at the time. Now, he could tell me anything and you're supposed to
So-
believe it, but anyway.
I do know that during the construction of the St. Anthony's Hospital, that there was discoveries.
Of everything.
I wouldn't say everything. I would say that there was discoveries made. Primarily, there was asbestos that was found. And I know that, during the construction, all of that was removed as part of the activity. The answer is, you go dig anywhere in the Denver metro area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You have the potential to encounter something. So, and unless you dig up the entire area, you're not gonna be able to determine whether it is or it's not contaminated.
And this was after you gave it its residential land usage designation.
I would say the answer to that is yes, but
I've heard a lot of yeses to a lot of them.
the answer is, if you want perfect, it's never gonna be perfect.
Well, but we're dealing with a site that's definitely not perfect. And then you're trying to shove it down my throat as perfect, and it's not.
No, I'm saying it has a no further action under
Well, it has
standard
no further
reasonable
action
processes.
required.
But then on top of the no further action, all of these activities are still gonna be governed. And they're, the redeveloper is going to, utilize, materials handling plans in the, off chance that they discover something. Materials handling plan, and then for the northern part, like an operations and maintenance plan. They also, something that hasn't been discussed is for that northern area, we potentially, if desired, we could clean all of that up and then remove the institutional control.
Right.
And, have, unrestricted use.
Right.
Up there. But even after the no further action, there's still like governing documents that, must be complied with. To ensure that the work is done appropriately and to avoid these things that you're worried about.
No, because I've seen too many times in the past, well, yes, it got approval and we found this and it wasn't on our list, but yeah, we found this and the government approved it and now we're holding the bucket that the people are losing their homes or they have to move and I'm not even gonna go down that road if I don't, if there's any likelihood of anything happening, and all I'm hearing here is just you guys want to wash your hands of it and give it over to the developer.
Anyway, I think, let me
That's
just
my
make
opinion.
one comment. I think we're all here,
That's
we don't
my
need to
opinion.
argue the
I know,
fine
that's
points.
fine.
But I think we're all here, we're all for
If you're
development.
fighting like hell.
We've gotta have development.
No, because of the efforts that have gone into it.
I haven't seen an effort in the last
To
10
get
years.
here
Where's the
today.
effort? What happened in the last 10 years? Why haven't you opened those wells and tested them?
I was not required to, and they.
There, bingo. Okay, government, okay, I was not required to.
I think we're all here for development. I mean, it's not, we all gotta live with development. My question is, we're concerned about environmental impact over the years. Little Mrs. Jones that buys a property over there, and all of a sudden she starts glowing in her kitchen. She's gonna come back at Green Mountain Water and say, well, it's in the water,
You guys approved it.
and you guys approved it.
Whoa.
That's the issue right there at hand. You're talking,
Yeah.
whatever, I mean,
Ooh.
that's where it's coming from.
Well, anyway, like I say, at this point, I think it's kind of
Let's-
a board
Yeah,
debate.
Yeah, it's a debate.
And like I say, good point. I find it very illuminating, so thank you very much for doing
Yes.
that.
Without doubt.
But I tell you what, to be moving along, and again, if people wanna jump in, I think it's a good addition. But I would like you guys, I know I interrupted your flow big time.
It's just, you're bringing up, this report is good. It brought up a lot of points and I got it all.
Well, listen, I'm learning an awful lot from all this, so, so thank you to everybody.
Me too.
But anyway, why don't we go back to you guys?
Yeah, no, perfect.
And while we're doing that, our legal guys, my personal thing about it is like, I don't want the district to get into some legal problems down the road. As everybody knows, I've spent the last 2 days in court on another issue that we've had. And one of the lessons I've learned, get your ducks in a row the first time rather than trying to fix it up later. So in the end here, I might ask you guys if you have some input, but not right now. Just put you on notice. I'll ask for input if you want to. So would you guys like to continue? Sure, absolutely.
No, just going back to kind of what we proposed and kind of on the topic of discussion here just a moment ago. I don't think, we're not questioning whether or not the no further action determinations met the standard. We certainly think they did, but they weren't, the no further actions didn't necessarily mean 100% guarantee of clean conditions. So it's just a kind of a confirmation that we're proposing. Even Vertex themselves, even after the NFAs recommended additional confirmation for their client. And similarly, we're recommending additional confirmation for the district because we felt that certain areas weren't measured for confirmation. It kind of just goes back to that old adage that trust but verify. It's we have no reason to say that there's hidden issues here. It's just out of abundance of caution to collect these additional confirmation samples to just provide that data to help eliminate some of those concerns. So a lot of our proposed soil sampling locations, groundwater sampling locations are to provide that additional confirmation. And it's not necessarily a question of the NFA, it's just that for that remote possibility that something was missed during the remediation. So we proposed a couple different areas for groundwater sample locations, primarily in the northeast corner. And again, we've proposed soil sampling more congruent with the proposed utility locations, where just the Vertex locations were not, there were some that correlated to those, but there were a lot of it were not. So that's kind of the basis of what we're recommending is to be focused on the utility alignments, just to confirm that. And on top of having, if there's an agreement to go with clean corridors, which I think it would be a great idea, that would help alleviate some of these concerns as well. Even on the southern portions, that's pretty much going to happen in the LCA areas. It might be good to incorporate that into the southern area as well. So we presented in our report various different sampling. I won't go into too much detail because of the time, but various different groundwater, soil vapor, and soil samples. I'm going to talk about some of the soil vapor here in a minute. I mentioned the soil confirmation sampling kind of congruent with the depths of the district utility. So if there's proposed sanitary sewer to 15 feet, that's where we kind of want to grab a soil sample for, just to verify what conditions are going on there. And to measure those for some consistent constituents, just to compare those to historical data. And then during construction, we also are recommending an actual 100% visual inspection during construction, just as excavated material is coming up, that can be inspected as well, just to determine if any unexpected materials or asbestos is encountered during installation of the utility lines.
What about vapor sampling?
Yeah, I've got that here coming up next. Let me tail that just for a couple more here. It's coming up. The potential for remaining steam lines, that was discussed previously. Hopefully it's not an issue. But in some of the documentation, it did indicate that there were some remaining, but if that's not the case, even better. Vapor sampling, because of the presence of the landfills, and kind of confirmation, just to make sure that there hasn't been any methane generation over time. You know, since we don't know if any organic materials or trees or vegetation might have been disposed of in those landfills in the past. Confirmation that methane or any other VOC vapor issues are not an issue, that we proposed some vapor sampling just to confirm that's not a potential concern at the site.
What is your proposed technique for measuring methane?
We were proposing typical soil vapor sampling. I think it was, I don't think we got into the actual methodology, what methods we were going to use, but whether it's sumicans or some other types of methodology or on-site meters for methane, that type of thing in conjunction with that. We haven't worked out those exact details yet, but that's kind of what we're proposing is conceptually anyway.
Just so the information, methane cannot be detected by a PID.
Correct, right. There'd be a specific methane CH4 meter specific to methane and in the field, and then subsequent sample analysis by the lab for methane specific in addition to VOC. So if that's a separate container or not, but yeah, so we're just proposing that, and I appreciate that. But that's what we would definitely make sure that we're following proper sampling procedures for that. And the map showed various locations, kind of more associated with the landfill areas, at least for the southern development. And, you know, in the future, you might have to go through this process again once more specific development plans are presented. You might have to do a similar investigation as well for that. But at least for the southern areas in the West 4th Avenue locations that we propose, some soil vapor locations here, kind of congruent with the utility locations, just to see if there's any issues related to that.
So it's construction debris is the waste.
Organics can generate methane over time, so that definitely could be a case. And you know, if there's, you know, so we don't really know if that's there or not. But as again, do we have enough data to rule out organics there? Is it potentially somewhat straightforward and an easy way to verify? You know, collecting these soil vapor samples aren't terribly difficult. You know, approaching it from that, you know, at least obtaining some actual field data maybe is better than, unless that other data exists either in documentation to prove that, you know, there's no possibility of methane generation in those landfills. And, you know, we'd definitely be willing to reconsider that. But I don't know if I've seen enough to kind of change my position on that, or our position on that, excuse me. But
So
yeah,
you're suggesting that vapor sampling south of North Avenue?
within the MECLA, so this is still within the designated MECLA area, so there is landfill material.
Beneath 4th Ave.
We're beneath 4th Ave, which is the MECLA area, so that would be directly in the landfill, the landfill material. So a couple of these locations.
The MECLA historically was a pH contaminated area, not a landfill contaminated area.
Okay.
So, they, and, you know, I can't be categorically correct, but if you look at the air photos, and believe me, I've looked at a lot of air photos at the Denver Federal Center, I don't recall any soil disturbance activity of the type that would be associated with disposal. The reason that the, V-ditch north is listed the way it is because of pH contamination, not because of the landfill.
No, I can
Which
appreciate
is
that.
semi-volatile organic compounds and not volatile
Yeah,
organic.
no, I think our main concern is potential, again, for
But-
volatile
But
methane.
if based on the work that's been done out there, that no landfill debris was identified.
Understood. I think that
Okay.
the basis was just as a check, just because the potential for, if that did exist, the potential for migration along utility lines, you know, that presents a potential migration to, you know, the indoor air, and who's going to get the blame on that? That's the district potentially. And this is just one additional data set to maybe hopefully eliminate that as a potential concern. And that's, I think, that kind of our basis is more of a potential concern than maybe.
So it's trying to eliminate as much risk as possible.
Correct. Yes, trying to be as cautious as possible,
And-
trying to think of the district's kind of concerns and worries, and maybe this is a possible way to mitigate some of that.
Future liabilities.
And so methane rises, right? So if the systems that you're dealing with are at the north end, which are at the high end, isn't it gonna go that direction?
Yeah, I mean,
Rather
it's possible,
than-
I mean, it's capped, I mean, I know it's whether it's a pavement cap, vegetation. There is a soil cover on it, whether those potentially can contain methane, and I
But
suppose.
are you thinking that the methane from the landfill is gonna come south?
Well, yes, if utility.
I'm just asking the question.
Yes, if utility corridors are cut through the MECLA or potentially future into the LCA, that could potentially present a corridor if vapors exist there, that could, the utility trenches could allow a conduit for that to occur. So that's why, to eliminate that as a potential issue, that we were recommending maybe this additional testing or even preventative measures, even if considered maybe overboard, in the sense that you could easily put trench dams, like you could put seals basically on those trenches, just to seal off those northern areas. If that's a concern, if vapor migration is a concern, you can put those into utility trenches as an additional mitigation or engineering control to help reduce that potential risk.
Okay.
Plus, the developer owns that land to the north, so there is potential for development there, so if we proceed with this, they're gonna come back, a few years or a year or so and say, look, we're gonna develop this area, since you already give us this, now you're gonna have to give it, we want this, so. Everything he's discussing and bringing up is all valid stuff, and whether or not it's above or below it, we have to take it into consideration.
We touched on the groundwater dewatering. I don't think I need to reiterate some of that, but.
What does dewatering mean?
I'm just, taking water out of your excavation or dewatering the excavation. So removing water. Dewatering means removing water
Removing water from the ground,
from the ground. Correct.
as in suck it out,
Correct.
pump it out.
Pump it, suck it, whatever, however you need to do that. To dewater your excavation to allow you to construct whatever you need to construct.
Not a term I use in ordinary life, okay?
The trench basically has to be dry when they're putting the pipe in.
How do you dewater? I mean, I'm sort of being facetious as a straw and then sucking.
No, usually, you excavate when you hit below the water table, you're either putting in a suction lift pump or you could put in dewatering wells. That's a little bit more sophisticated for like a building or a foundation. But usually typically just a simple excavation, it's just a suction lift pump.
Suck it out in the truck.
Suck it out into a pump
For
truck.
my layman's thinking is it's a suction.
And then it's gonna fill again, then the water will come.
Right, so you have to keep up, so your pumping rate has to keep up with the recharge rate into the excavation. So that's typically how they do it.
Like a sump pump on.
Correct, yes.
Huge massive sump.
Right, and as you go down, you could dewater as you go down and dry your excavation, but under a permit condition, you have certain requirements to discharge that water in an appropriate way, that it's either meeting total suspended solids requirements, not contaminated, meeting certain limits on your surface water discharge criteria.
And we won't know that until we get down there.
Right, if you encounter it, and then after you test it, and so.
And then there's the cost, and then there's the issue of the water contaminated.
Right, so these are all if questions.
So question at that point, if we have a water main break and it pumps out 400,000 gallons and it all becomes contaminated from a barrel of whatever laying in there, we have to pump out all that 400,000 gallons potentially.
Potentially, I mean, if that's, I don't know, potentially it may need to, I mean.
Yeah, it's
Listen,
an if scenario.
As was stated before, if it's an emergency situation, a lot of that water might find its way on the surface and discharge, discharge to surface water, then it's somewhat potentially a reportable condition to the state. And then the state might have, the Water Quality Control Division might have issues with, well, was any contaminants discharged? Is there any mitigation efforts, remediation involved? So if there is a contamination or a contamination issue, it could turn into more involved.
And can we be fined for it going downstream?
I mean, if it was
Not
an
contagious?
emergency, if it was not intentional, that's probably not going to happen, but you may be required to do mitigation efforts to remediate or clean up. If let's say
Downstream.
something was deposited in the stream, you can clean it up and dispose of it. You might have to do things like that, but.
If EPA get involved and come
I
back
think it
and
would still all be in the
find
same
us,
water
or if
quality
we
control
had,
division.
we had
state.
a main break and it was contaminated and it got into the
It's
sewer system and got into
Yeah.
a stream and
The city,
then the
right.
city and then the EPA, then there all the
Well, the
support going.
state,
Yeah, because there was
Or bank
something, there's something buried under the north side that we didn't have and aware of, because it wasn't on the list.
Is there such things, I don't know, I'm playing dumb, but is there such thing as a collection area where if you had a blowout on that area that it wouldn't go downstream? Is there,
I suppose.
would that be a
different
connection
measures-
pond?
Yeah, I mean, if you had, let's say you had a way to, let's say, plug the outlet on a pond, let's say to contain, if you knew it was contaminated, I suppose you could take it, oh, let's at least contain it so it doesn't go all the way south.
Okay, I'm just curious.
You know, you can do some measures like that. I mean, but you still have to mitigate that, remove the water, if it's contaminated, and deal with it that
But
way.
anything that's groundwater has to be examined by who?
Anything, well, groundwater, if you're proposing to discharge it, surface water requires a permit, which requires
And who issues that permit?
Water Quality Control Division, state of
State of
Colorado.
Colorado.
State of Colorado.
And so then you have to apply, abide by those conditions and those permits. So there's a bit of a process with that, but it's very common, I think, but with remediation permits, it's just elevated just because of the potential contamination. Just moving on here. There's one topic brought up in the comfort letter from the CDPHE in regard to a discussion about potential proposal to modify the Northern LCA and MCA and MECLA O&M plan and materials management plan to apply that to the southern development. And that was one option being explored to provide an additional way for the state to now come back into the southern development, even though the NFAs have been issued, to come back into the project to kind of oversee it and kind of make sure, bring their eyes onto the project, even though currently they're not required to do so under the NFA. There was some discussion in that letter about that. And one of our recommendations was to get more information on whether or not where that is in the process, if that's still being considered, or is that something you're going to do, or you're recommending to do?
Based on conversations this week, we are still going to do that.
Okay, so from the district's perspective, I guess that would bring the state or CDPHE back onto the southern parcel
Correct.
and get them involved with reviewing, approving, and getting their eyes on the project where they weren't necessarily required to do that
Correct.
under the NFAs. So that could be a good thing in a certain aspect to get their additional oversight on things. So
It would be an uber conservative measure. And yeah, it's likely to go down that path.
Future water line break, this is already brought up. I think we discussed the potential issues, and then there again, it's a huge unknown if what would happen in a certain situation like that. But it's a potential scenario that the district should be at least considering, and not be surprised of potentially down the line. We did look at potential, one of the aspects to the project was to assess potential risk to the pipes or the district pipes or integrity of the pipes. And we didn't find anything in the documentation that the levels would be either a physical degradation or permeation risk to the piping based on what we know currently. And adding clean utility corridors would help that situation as well. We did propose additional testing just to verify things and obtaining updated pH data, just because we don't have, if the water is overly acidic, which we don't expect, but if it is, that could present some pipe degradation issues as well. So with that additional verification, we just maybe put that issue to rest as far as any physical degradation to the district piping.
By the way, if anybody needs to go to the bathroom, as you can tell, it's through that door back there.
I guess recommendation number 9 had to deal with just obtaining clarity on future obligations and responsibility for activities occurring in the future. After the developer is gone, who holds that ownership responsibility with the LCA and MECLA for the annual inspections and reporting, reporting to the state. Who exactly is responsible for that? And then how does that extend to the utility easements and the utility lines in the project area? Just getting clarity on, okay, is the district responsible for their utilities, or is the homeowners association, or is someone else responsible? Is getting clarification on that, I think would be helpful for the district's decision making.
Definitely. Did the lawyers hear that part? Yeah, you can see where I'm going.
Just almost through. Number 10 was geotechnical considerations. Even though this is outside of the scope of our kind of desktop study, the obvious, issue could be settlement issues and for utilities and potential damage related to geotechnical settlement in areas that have informed fill areas. I think this more applies to the northern areas than the southern, but that potential exists and just something to be aware of. How is that potential issue being mitigated and engineered and dealt with?
Well, particularly in the landfill area, because landfills are notorious for being unstable when built on.
Correct, right, exactly. It's common in unconsolidated materials that have shifting over time, and that could damage the sewer line pretty easily.
And they're, like you said, steam pipes are, you're not sure. They say they're not there, but they could be theirs. There's
Right.
stuff's there that we don't know.
Potentially, right, and hopefully, with engineering and construction, that these are installed in a proper way. Some of those issues can be.
How about those wells that are sitting there? I'm sure there were steel casings,
Right, and
No, they're probably PVC.
PVC just came along later.
30. The wells, our wells,
Yeah, your wells.
our wells are generally PVC pipe.
so
Interesting. So they haven't been there long.
They've been in there since the late 90s.
That's not long.
That's 35 years, that's 34 years ago.
The program
Yeah,
started in
for
1990.
land that's
Yeah.
was in the Fort Wood.
Well, but back to the corrosion potential issue that he was discussing. So out of the 50 to 75 water line breaks that have occurred in the Denver Federal Center, it's caused by deterioration of the pipe due to hammering of the system, rubbing of the rock.
Ground movement.
Yeah, ground movement. So I've never seen a pipe deteriorated based on corrosive activity.
Did I just read that they're putting in a mining and engineering environmental group at the Federal Center? I thought that was in a paper.
We're putting in a closed loop geothermal system.
Okay, no, I mean another department, I guess you'd say.
USGS is moving to school mines,
Okay,
and then we're building, Food and Drug Administration, a new laboratory.
okay, I just read something in the paper about mining or something like that.
Yeah, there's a big partnership between school mines and USGS, obviously, it's a
Yeah.
natural fit, and so they're looking to build a new campus out on school mines and eventually move out of building 20 in the Fed Center.
Oh, okay,
There'll still be some USGS presence, obviously, on the Fed Center, because they're one of the biggest tenants we have.
Yeah.
But there's a push to have closer ties to school mines.
okay, I read something. Let me follow up. You told me something I had never heard before. Something about rubbing of rocks or,
Yeah, so hammering, so so historically, the pipes weren't put in bedding material. They appeared to be put in just
dirt.
dirt with pebbles and rocks. And over time, it'll hammer and it'll wear a hole in the pipe.
And that's not like earthquakes or something, is it?
No, it's just, so like,
Ground shift.
the Denver Federal Systems water system historically had two pumps. One at the northeast corner of the facility and another at 7th Street. And if there was drainage, you'd end up getting the pumps working against each other and moving the pipe.
Really?
There's a process called cavitation, where if you have extremely low pressure in a water zone, you can actually get air bubbles, they're not air bubbles, usually vacuum bubbles forming. And when those collapse, you get tremendous hammering.
Learn something new every day. Okay.
Dinner time?
And then 11, just for future use for the district, maybe documenting some of these issues now, if personnel changes in the future, that the
Absolutely.
district's aware of, hey, this is a special consideration area, hey, be aware of these issues. And having a plan that's in place for future reference is maybe a good idea.
Absolutely.
To document all this. And then during the review discussions for the draft version of our report, there are various comments and issues raised by stakeholders. And one of those had to do with potential for additional sampling of maybe potential radiological components or chemical weapons components. And we felt that there isn't any documentation that would indicate that those type of materials were disposed of at the site. We are aware, that as was mentioned before, there is a reactor, used by the USGS, since 1969 on the site there. There was a news story back in 2016 of a water tank leak associated with maybe some materials related to that operation, but it was found not to be an impact to the environment. But this is down gradient of the facility, so wouldn't necessarily be a direct concern to the property.
Question, I'm obviously blue skying at this point, so you can tell me to settle down.
Mhm.
But we had Rocky Flats with nuclear weapons. We had the Arsenal, which is doing chemicals. We have Pueblo doing chemicals. With all that activity in the feds going on in the state, is there any chance that any of that stuff might have accidentally ended up here? I'm reaching, of course.
To my knowledge, the only materials that have been brought on site by DOE are their records. The medical records. They store all of those records for their employees, and they're housed in 2 buildings on the Denton Federal.
In the federal center, it's their largest records.
Well, NARA's now moved.
Oh, okay.
NARA's now.
They used to be.
NARA used to be on the facility, but the only materials from DOE that I'm aware of that have been brought on site are records.
So what kind of additional testing are you specifically thinking about?
Well, I guess our recommendation wasn't necessarily warranted for specific radiological testing, just because of the lack of documentation or, whether chemical weapons or agents were disposed there. I mean, it certainly can be done. I mean, it certainly can be done, but, based on what's been documented, what's kind of the understanding of what's happening there, that it wasn't necessarily a recommendation from Tri-Hydro to do that additional testing, but it's certainly, if that's the concern of the district, that's, you can supplement that, supposedly if that's a concern. If you have other data, other information that would point to that as being a potential concern, that certainly can be added onto it, but it's not necessarily a recommendation from Tri-Hydro.
Sure.
So the reactor is a 1 megawatt research reactor. There's several of them across the country, college campuses of this. They did for specific groups, Boy Scouts, everything. They're regulated by the NRC. NRC comes up twice a year to audit them. And there is a public records archive associated with that reactor that's available through the NRC website. They've got a database called Atoms, and there are hundreds of documents associated with that reactor. It administratively shut down for a period of time, but it had nothing to do with the release. And every year that reactor produces a report of all the monitoring they do on a yearly basis, both with their employees inside the control zone, as well as environmental monitoring they do around that reactor building.
So what are they doing with that reactor? Is that
They irradiate rocks for research. They have a big partnership with the nuclear engineering program at the School of Mines. So
they don't power the.
It's nothing to do with power generation. It's just a low, very small, 1 megawatt's a very, very small
Okay, I was just
system. So
it's like radio carbon dating.
Kind of, there's a lot of different applications that USGS does with their research there, but, it's strictly research. The reactor doesn't run 24/7. They only use it when they need to use it, when they've got stuff, experiments that they.
And when it blows, is it like a small cloud or a big cloud?
It's in a.
You can see it from your front
Head towards your house.
Wow.
I'm sorry, go.
Oh, no, it's in a concrete model, and they've got continuous airborne monitoring. They do drills every year with West Metro, the FBI, everybody. Again, it's not a unique thing. There are several types of these types of reactors all across academia in this country.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Actually, since I was on the Fed site, I knew all about that. I wasn't concerned, but I'm glad you brought it up for everybody else.
And to Dave's point, it is down gradient. So even if there were groundwater issues, which again, I know there was, I think, an article about that tritium leak in the water. They've done groundwater monitoring, we've done groundwater monitoring, and to the satisfaction of both the NRC on the federal level, which regulates them, and the state, we've never found anything in terms of radiation. Our biggest challenge with radiation is more sealed sources and devices that Joe Bob leaves his density meter behind and or leaves it on a dock somewhere for GSA to dispose of. That's generally the type of rat stuff we have to deal with in the Fed Center.
You can actually take Boy Scouts on a field trip there and look down into the reactor.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful blue.
Yes. I have a postcard from there, like an image.
Okay, so Dave,
I can address some of the radioactivity issues.
what do we do from here?
Right.
What, are you still going?
Well, I was just gonna mention, I know that there's several labs at the Federal Center that do radiological testing, and they sometimes receive materials that might be radioactive, whether they're uranium samples or related to that, you know, they're handling, there's no documentation of them improperly disposing of those laboratory materials in any way there. But, to your point,
Back in 2015, there was a lot of discussion of this particular site, and Larry Walk and others were, I don't know if Larry's, I think he's retired now. He's the former director of the CDPHE, and pardon?
That's, yep, I'm agreeing.
Okay. Anyhow, I made some comments regarding radioactivity, and I don't know if this is a public document or not, but he sent me a response to my comments that was very thorough. And there's some information that was helpful in the sense that there were some radioactive materials that were on the site. There's an asphalt paved area which was used for storage, temporary storage of probably uranium ores. These uranium ores were to be processed at the USGS facilities, the geochemical analytical facilities, and those samples were processed. Larry did not provide much information on the volume of materials, but they were deposited on, get some little bit more information here. Basically an asphalt, asphalt pad was where these materials were deposited. 880 foot by 350 foot asphalt pad in one area 12N. And these were taken to building 25 for testing. He did not report what the volumes of the materials were. So it's difficult to know whether these were like a truckload dump of ore samples from a uranium mine farther west in Colorado or what. But as a result of that information, the CDPHE took approximately 22 soil samples from beneath and around the asphalt pad, and they were analyzed for uranium, which was the prime, because these were ore samples, that was the primary material. This is part of a USGS study of uranium ores, probably from the Colorado Plateau, which is an area, a large area to the west and extends beyond western Colorado. But this soil samples were basically tested negative. So the question is, in terms of there were kind of low concentrations of uranium in the soil samples, the sample, the material after it was processed by the USGS was deposited on a field basically adjacent to the laboratory areas on the south side of building 25. And they later discovered that there was a lot of radioactivity associated with that area. That area was excavated and the material was hauled away. And you and GSA might remember that activity.
That's in the northwest corner of building 25, and it was excavated, and I would say that it wasn't a large amount of radioactivity. There was elevated concentrations of metals.
Mm-hmm. But uranium would be one of the metals.
Correct, but it was not a radioactive issue, it was a metal issue. And there is a difference.
Well, I beg to differ. Radioactivity is gamma radiation from uranium, and it can be.
I understand it, but we cleaned it up based on a metal standard.
Okay, the metal standard, sure.
Okay.
That I understand.
is, oh, yeah.
That I don't know if it's public or not.
Yeah, I guess that's one document, I guess I don't recall seeing. If it's a public document, that'd be good to put in the record.
You check into that, maybe we can. Right, include that, because it seems like that's really, very pertinent information. But if it comes from the director,
Yeah, that's-
of Colorado Marsh, where?
Quickly to mention.
I'm sorry? I guess it's good, but it was a private letter.
We're kind of falling apart here.
Okay.
Hold on.
I'm sorry for that.
Well, anyway, by the way, it's getting it. We've been here for a couple of
Right.
hours.
But that effectively, one of the questions, the potential schedule for additional sampling, this is very very subjective, it can be accelerated, decelerated, but, within 2 to 4 months, maybe we were anticipating, theoretically, we could grab these additional samples and then during construction, oversee, the aspects of the construction. But that effectively was our presentation, and this was just for questions and answers at this point. So that concluded our presentation.
All right, well, since I'm the probably official timekeeper, the board members are here, they're used to long meetings. But they're like regular people here today and have lives. And so I do have to be considerate of that. I don't know how much longer they want to be subjected to this. Obviously, I'll stay until midnight, but everybody else might want to go home. So with that in mind, I mean, I did give the lawyers a heads up that I might, kind of say if they have any input. But before I go to them, anybody else have any questions or input? I mean, I assume everybody wants to kind of leave here by 9.
One comment, it is possible to do radiometric surveying, and there are companies that will do radiometric surveying. They can be in the form of a drone flying over the area. It can be form of ground surveys where you basically go up and down across the surface of the ground with radiometers to measure gamma radiation, which would be the best thing to look for uranium. I did not take a look at how expensive those surveys are, but it is possible to do that kind of more detailed surveying than say 22 samples. But nonetheless, it's probably an unknown. It's in terms of whether or not there's other radio materials. In one of the aerial photos that you didn't show up on the northeastern corner, this would be in the area 8, there is a whole series of piles of what looked like could be ore dumps that sat in the area would be, again, the north area on the west end. And we don't know, those are unknown materials. We do not know what those were. The coal area, you can tell, this is coal, it's got the right color for coal, the documents that say this was coal. But we don't know what that one area is in the west end of the north area. What were those piles? And is there any documentation that might say what kind of piles were dumped there? They're very orderly. There was some systematic study because of the nature of the piles. The aerial photo is old enough that I don't think it was uranium ores, but the uranium work started in the 40s. And so we just don't know what those piles could have been.
Anything else, Jim?
No, there was another radioactivity issue, but that's been completely taken care of.
Okay, you're good. Bruce, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, I have a request.
Well, the answer's no. So
Okay, well, I was gonna ask you. I'm a Lakewood City Councilor, and I come here to learn about this.
say, kill him now before you can go.
I'm the decent one.
He's
I was
not.
wondering, if I could give a couple people cards, and you could send me your contact info so that if this comes up in Lakewood, I can call the serious people. So like I was gonna.
Serious people.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Okay.
I mean, you know how it works in, yeah, both you guys. How it works in Lakewood is like we had a study session on metro districts and they invited
I
in
just want to quit.
a lot
No, I
of
want to make a
metro
motion.
districts.
Well, they're
And that was it.
Oh, they're here.
So that's very subpar of my book. I like to talk to the real people. To know what the heck's going on.
Sir, any legal thoughts?
Well, no, but some procedural thoughts. I think strictly speaking, we've covered 5A and probably 5B. We do have on the agenda further Q&A with GSA and CDPHE. I don't know if they have any further comments, but
Do you guys? Cause I was thinking I was kind of incorporating everybody all together.
No, I think, thank you for that. I have a question. I'll look at our analytical data and see what we have along the west side of the facility that we've been collecting over the last few years and provide it to Lincoln and let them handle it how they want to handle it.
Does anybody have any specific questions for either of these gentlemen? Okay.
Just to comment, I'm very quite happy with your being here, making a very thorough presentation on what GSA has done in the past and what your knowns are and that sort of thing. And also for Tri-Hydro, I feel like your report is, especially with the recommendations, is very excellent.
Thank you.
And I do want to apologize. I know I've messed you up big time, but I thought it was really great. I mean, I like this format, and so I really appreciate your
I
input.
learned a lot.
You're my new favorites. I'll recommend you. Other, Mr. Gardner, do you want to make a comment?
I was wondering if you're gonna, somebody's gonna make a motion to pay Tri-Hydro for the study.
Yeah, let me clear, you're expecting money? We get $100 for being here.
Oh,
It's like, you can have $100.
I'll give you a free glass of water.
Last meeting you didn't accept it, so if you do something to acknowledge that you've received it, Josh might be able to pay them. Be a nice thing. They're part of the family.
Well, I think that,
Do you need a motion to pay them?
no, 5E, I think is, you know, the
Unless, so representatives from Lincoln Properties and Vertex as well are here. So if the board has any questions for them as well,
Okay.
or if they have any, if you would like to hear from them in response to either Tri-Hydro.
Well, listen, I'm willing to stay till midnight, so, any of you guys want to speak up?
I mean, I'll jump in, I guess, just to address at least the first part about, the site and the intent to enroll the southern piece into the corrective action plan or program to get the state's oversight of this. As a part of all that, obviously, there's materials handling plans that will get put into place for the southern parcel, the area under Fourth Avenue, the Melca area, and the existing one that already is in place for the LCA. You know, that'll get updated. The Melca area will get updated, and that materials handling plan will get updated, and the O&M plan, that's the operations and maintenance plan that's in place, as part of the requirement for that. And then this other piece ultimately, right, will have that same materials management plan that will dictate how things get done south of all of the Melca stuff, or that drainage line, right, and how we manage soil, how we manage groundwater, construction debris if we come across it. I mean, confirmation sampling along all of those utility lines, both within the Melca, Fourth Avenue, anything obviously in the future that happens as part of phase 2 in the LCA, the north parcel, and then obviously everything under, on the south parcel as well. So all of those confirmation samples will get collected as a part of the development. You know, the clean fill corridors will be a part of all of that per Green Mountain's requirements. And again, that'll be under full-time oversight by us and, you know, perhaps Tri-Hydro if you guys hire them to do that. And then under the guidance of the CDPHE, is kind of how that framework is in general.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to, so my name is Polly Jess and I'm the outside environmental counsel to Lincoln Properties. And I think, I did want to just say the recommendations from Tri-Hydro are not unusual recommendations for work on these types of sites. These are very manageable issues. And, you know, I think we have some opportunities to provide a path forward that gives the board the assurances that they need. That's, you know, we do this all around the city with lots of different utility providers. So, you know, that's something that we've had a little bit of opportunity to discuss among the attorneys earlier today. And so I don't want the board to think we're surprised by the Tri-Hydro recommendations. And, you know, as we discussed earlier and Scott's pointed out, most of these issues are addressed by virtue of the materials handling plan, which can provide the clean corridors, the utility design that protects the district. So again, all of this is stuff that Tri-Hydro's done, Vertex has done. We've helped clients negotiate on the legal side. So again, you know, we can quibble over, you know, some details, but in general, these are common practices for assuring that utility providers have orders that don't result in liability to them.
Anything else from?
Just one thought that, along the utility corridors, you might consider you doing ground penetrating radar to look for potential obstacles for the trenching.
One comment I'd like to respond. The trenching will be done by Lincoln Properties under materials handling plan. So if it's there, they'll dig it out.
Gotcha.
And I think that may have gotten, some of the process by which construction happens may have gotten lost in some of this discussion.
Yes.
So, you know, when you plan to dig a corridor that meets Denver water standards, we'll be doing confirmation sampling. And so the samples that you need will be done as you recommended, not pre-construction, as you recommended post-construction or during construction. So at the end of the day, there will be a data package that tells the board, yes, the corridor is clean. We'll document where the fill came from. All of that is pretty standard practice on these sites and part of what Vertex is developing. And I think has already developed actually.
Yes.
So Rick will be seeing that soon.
Anything else?
I just wanted to acknowledge and thank everybody for taking the time to do this. I think this was an important step in our process. And so just appreciate everybody being willing to take the time and actually hear the report, having the experts in the room be able to respond to some of these items. And I think what we're all trying to demonstrate is that we're here to do the right thing. And this process is taking a long time. And we'd like to see some resolution so we can get moving forward, knowing that we're all gonna do the responsible thing. So I just want to say thank you for everybody for having this meeting and being here and spending the time.
You guys are off, you're not off the hook. Did you all have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think not at this juncture, I'm Ann Proudy and this is Andrew Emmer from Hallman Hart, and we've recently been retained to assist the board in this process, and so really appreciated everyone taking the time to be here. That was, you know, a lot of great information, and so thank you all, and I think more discussions to come in other forums, but thanks everyone for their time tonight, definitely.
Did you want to do?
I do. I'd like to make a motion, but before I make that motion, I would just like to say that, you know, we're all tasked on the board to look at, you know, your proposal. And at first, there was several of us that voted against it. I think after looking at it, I think that I've kind of changed that vote into a different scenario. But there's some things that I think that need to be changed. And the main concern that I have is, instead of making this, I'm making a motion that we change this from a final report to a preliminary report, an interim report, or a recommendation plus more. Saying that basically this is not a final report by any means. There's a lot of changes to it, a lot of ifs, a lot of buts, a lot of indecisions and stuff like that. But that would be the only thing that I would recommend, and I put that as a motion.
I second the motion. We need discussion on it.
As part of that, are you also electing to adopt the recommendations made in the report leading to the final report?
I'm willing to do that.
Well, I just want to get some clarification on the
Yes.
motion.
Yes,
So you are conceiving of this as a preliminary report,
preliminary report.
adoption and implementation of these recommendations.
Correct.
Leading to a final report.
Correct.
That's-
Can we sign off if Josh can pay him then? No, but that, yes.
Second it. Go.
The other,
Because I know we want them to get paid, that's a given. And I'm pretty sure my sense is we want to do these recommendations. The question in my mind, we want to do additional recommendations.
Well, as it being a preliminary report,
it is,
we will discuss it with the board and come up with what we think should be defined in the final report. And then present that back to them, have them come back with it, and then agree upon that final report.
Yeah.
And plus, we did talk about that we would have an open forum for comments from within the residents of
Citizens.
the area.
The reason I asked the question was, them working or, you know, on what's in the report. I think that's obviously, I would go for it, but I think there's a lot of other things that have been raised. I think that several of us would like to see some other stuff.
Yeah.
Now, is that something we can bring up the next meeting or whatever? I guess my point is, I don't want to give the impression that that's it.
No, it's not it. This was the first step in the process, because in my opinion, this was the first step in the process, as we discussed during the meeting. We were at a point where we got the report, we had questions about the report. Brought in the the experts, we discussed it, and that's where we are. We're gonna agree that preliminary, this looks good. But we still have other issues we need to discuss. There were things that were brought up, I wanted to put on the table between the board members and discuss them as to what was brought to that tonight. And then from there, I hope we can come to a meeting of the minds and come up with the recommendations to, this is what we additions we want in the report. Get to a point to where we can get to that final report.
So, Art and the board, would you be interested in, me and district staff working with environmental council to put together sort of an implementation plan that the board could adopt? Once it has had a chance to review that plan.
When you say implementation plan, is
So
that
implementation of the recommendations in the tri-hydro report, in addition to whatever
in addition to whatever we make?
suggestions.
Yes, that in my mind would be the next step.
And I have in mind that perhaps, some of your consultants might be a source of those recommendations that the board doesn't have at their hand right now. So we could work together to bring
I think
something.
we need to start moving down that road.
So I have a question. What was the purpose of hiring them? We're asking for the recommendations they provided, and we're not satisfied. Is that what that amounts to?
That's what it amounts to.
So why did we hire them?
I'm
Hired them to do it
satisfied with what we
preliminary.
got today. I think there's additional questions in my mind.
What are those questions?
Well, I don't wanna discuss them in front of, that's privy to the board, and we'll have that meeting.
But isn't that what we're here for?
Well, it's too open to my mind.
This is just a question and answer period.
I wanna bring up the issues I have with the people that are currently sitting at this table, other than the board members. This is strictly for the board.
So I have a motion on the table,
I second it.
and he seconded. Want to bring it to a vote, Dave? Are we clear on what it is? We're going to,
So the motion pending is for adoption and implementation of the tri-hydro recommendations. Part of the discussion that I heard was a request for additional,
language.
processes.
Well, potential additional recommendations. It still needs to be discussed between the 5 board members and see, okay, I think we need this, A, B, and C, and vote on it.
Right, which I think is beyond the scope of the motion. So I think the motion originally was just for adoption and implementation of the recommendations from.
Okay, being
Well,
changed to
so I
a
do think
preliminary
It was
report, not a
making a
final.
preliminary report.
Yes, so I think that there would be a need for an additional motion following, rather than a vote on the consolidated motion, we'll call it. So,
I lost me at the end.
yeah, so what I'm saying is, I think that you should call a vote on the
Preliminary.
on the motion to refer to it as a preliminary report and adopt and implement the recommendations of the tri-hydro report. And then I think that there will be an opportunity for an additional motion
Tonight or later?
anytime. Okay, but I think that you need to vote on that limited motion first.
I can certainly see the
I
value for,
fail to see how they're not tied together, but I guess you can do it that way.
well,
Procedures, yeah.
you know me, I like to go home and think about it, and so I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't wanna be all done tonight, but on the other hand, I like their report.
Okay.
And,
I'll go with the report as a preliminary report.
and I want their recommendations to start be working on
Yeah,
it.
I don't think,
But it's not the end of the
it's
story.
not the end of the story.
It's just one step in a path. Yes, ma'am.
I was gonna make just a suggestion. It sounds like, what you need is some mechanism by which to implement those recommendations. You do have in your rules the ability to enter into a development agreement by which you can approve a project with conditions and obligations that flow as part of your development. My suggestion is, as an attorney, would be to have Dylan and Holland and Hart work with Tri-Hydro to prepare a list of the conditions and requirements you want to have that are based on Tri-Hydro's report. And then you'll have a legal mechanism to make sure that you have the protections you need from liability and the processes in place for acceptance of infrastructure. I don't know if that's something you said, that is, you don't have much precedent.
I'm not concerned, I've seen this in the past with what the developers' needs are and their timelines. I never will be. So, I'm gonna slow walk this as slow as I need to in my mind and how I feel warm and fuzzy about it. So right now, I'm willing to go down the path of saying, okay, this is a good report. Preliminary, we're gonna accept them and we can move forward on your recommendations. The recommendations in here are good and they're good, solid
But they
recommendations.
could change.
But, you know, when we get together as board members, you know, when you wanna go home and think about it, I wanna go home and think about it. And I wanna come up with some additional stuff that I think should work. I like what this gentleman brought to the table, with some additional stuff, that I wanna weigh in. And I like what these two gentlemen brought, because there was additional things that were said, from their point of view, which was fantastic to hear from the government, how there is. Now, I worked for the government a long time ago, and it was GSA,
And if there's proposed,
so it was not, I don't know how it was equipped. Anyway,
So do I need to change that motion?
I still think that you need to call the vote
I do too.
on that motion.
go ahead and call the vote. Got a second?
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I'm voting aye. Oh, okay, but I didn't want to influence the vote, so. Okay.
So the motion is passed. We will work with Tri-Hydro to implement the recommendations of the report and get them paid. And
Awesome.
if you have any additional concerns, you can raise them now, or you can raise them at a future board meeting. Or you can contact me or your environmental counsel for additional steps.
Is the board looking for a formal proposal for further work?
Eventually, yeah, like I say, in my mind, I think there's some more things to do. And I would at some point like to say, why don't we do these things? I'm just not prepared to do it tonight.
And there's one board member missing too. I'd like to hear her opinions on this. I know where she stands generally, but I think if she gets an opportunity to listen to this and hear what they said, particularly with the other two gentlemen, there's a lot of information there. And she may want to have some comments. So we're not doing anything tonight, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Well, I will begin working on the implementation.
Yes, that part.
Yes, so
That's done.
yes. So there are steps moving forward now
Yeah.
as part of this implementation.
And you will make sure that they get paid.
Yes.
And they will take me out to dinner.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute, yeah. I do have one other question, and this is beyond the proposal. Looking at this, I'm kind of a little bit leery. I already know that you've got 59 acres here and two different sections of this. And I was wondering if this proposal, is there any way that could be split? This is a proposal for the south, or recommendations proposal for the south area, and then this was another one for the north. I don't want to, I'm looking at it in the instance of, I don't want you to come back in 6 months and say, well, you've already approved 59 acres. We're moving forward with the north section, but we haven't even really discussed that north section yet. So that's the only other concern I have. That by splitting it in two, it sounds like you want to develop the south section and maybe the north section if you get around to that. Well, maybe it's fine and dandy for you, but for us, by approving the whole area, we don't have to come back and approve anything for the north.
I think our plans are specific to the south. And so that's
Okay,
what
could you mind splitting it into?
I think that's all the plans call for.
Yeah.
No, the whole thing is based on the north and south.
So the original investigation and stuff that we did obviously was part of the whole piece, the whole 59 acres.
Right.
The current development plan is just roadway improvements along Fourth Avenue and utility infrastructure work around about,
Okay.
and then south of that, so the south.
So we're not
That's
asking.
all, I don't even.
Can that be said somewhere in the,
It's, yeah.
I didn't see anywhere where it actually said,
It's not said clearly enough.
not clearly enough.
Just-
Yeah.
it's-
So I would like that put into do I need to make a motion on that?
No, I think that's contained.
That's understood?
Yes.
Okay, that's all my questions are, because I don't want to come back 6 months from now and say, well, you approved the digging of this in the south. Well, it applies to whole 59
No,
acres.
we didn't approve any of that.
I don't want to approve that.
Yeah, I'm the same thing. It's not some sort of broad brush, everything's all good. Like, kind of a narrow approval, and we'll think about the rest.
And you're just gonna come up with a plan with them on these recommendations, so that's it. And then we'll have a document to look at there and say, okay, that's just looking like it's a doable deal.
Yep, there will be a implementation plan document presented to the board, yes.
Thank you.
It probably won't be called that.
That's all I have to say.
Just steps by step, by step.
Board members, you have any other business? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned, and thank you for everybody for coming today.
Thank you for your presentation. Very good.
Well, thank you so much.